Chapter 136. Inside the dark cell. Soren saw dried blood everywhere. It seemed like they had used it many times. There were charcoal, branding iron, leather whips, saws and so on. The young man in front of them was no longer the same as before. There were dozens of whip marks on his body and he looked bloody. There were scars left by branding iron on his chest and the side of his face. There was also the mark of a slave on his forehead. His fingernails were pulled out one by one. The bloody scene made the two girls behind the middle-aged woman's face change slightly. It seemed like they almost vomited, but they forced themselves to hold it back. You bunch. I curse you. The young man's speech was a little slurred. It seemed like he had used up too much of his strength because of the blood loss. But his eyes were still vicious, and he cursed them with a ferocious expression. The sheriff seemed to want to restore his prestige. He picked up the whip and gave the young man a hard slap. The sheriff gasped and said, "Priest Tina, look. His mind has been completely controlled by the evil god. No matter how much we torture him, he will only say this." The middle-aged woman's face changed slightly. It seemed like she had never seen so much blood. She turned around and looked at Soren. It seemed like she wanted to ask him if there was a way. Soren's expression was very calm. He had seen too many scenes and the scene in front of him was nothing at all. He just slowly said, "Can you treat his injury? If this continues, he will soon die from excessive blood loss." The middle-aged woman hesitated for a moment. Then she raised her hand and cast a healing spell. The power of the divine spell began to take effect. The young man's blood quickly recovered, and he seemed to have recovered a lot. He opened his mouth and wanted to curse, but Soren stuffed a rag into his mouth, blocking the evil words that he wanted to blurt out. He turned around and looked at the others. He said softly, "The next scene might be a little unsuitable for children. I think it's better if you all leave." The people present were obviously hesitant. The middle-aged woman frowned. Then she turned around and walked outside. Her instincts told her that the adventurer in front of her might be telling the truth. She didn't want to see something that was too difficult to accept. The sheriff's expression was ugly, but he didn't walk out. He wanted to see what Soren was going to do. The young man in front of them had withstood almost all the torture without saying a word. He just kept cursing them for more than an hour. He did not believe that the adventurer in front of him could have any great means. "Step back a little." Soren looked at the others and gestured for them to stand far away. Then he said, "Don't talk and don't interrupt me. I need to be very focused on what I'm about to do. I don't want anyone to interrupt me." "Understood." His tone was very annoying, but his cold gaze made everyone shiver. It was as if they couldn't help but shiver. Soren smiled, but his expression was hard to describe. He walked up to the young man and whispered in his ear as if he was talking to himself, "Do you know? I'm very depressed today. When I saw what you did, I suddenly felt that I've been a joke for the past month. I've brought Vivian so far away from a dangerous place, but it seems like I've entered another dangerous place. You really don't give me peace. It's hard to find a safe place to hide. I'm not that afraid of fighting and I'm not that afraid of death. I just want her to grow up in a relatively safe environment. After all, she's only 8 years old. It's not too difficult to live away from some bloody killings and grow up happily, right? But it seems like the heavens are against me. Maybe there's really no place to escape. No matter what, I can't escape from this. Now think about it." Gloria's divination of Vivian said that she saw countless blood and fire. Maybe this is really fate. We've encountered so many things along the way. Even if we try our best to avoid them, we still encounter them. I don't know if it's my fate or Vivian's fate. Maybe it's both of our fates. Actually, I don't know what I want to say. Maybe I just want to say it casually. Because what I'm going to do next is something you will never want to see. But you have to see it and feel the whole process because you are my work." Soren slowly pulled out the curved sword. His palm trembled slightly, but soon it was as steady as a rock. But his fingers were white, probably because he used too much force. He looked into the eyes of the young man in front of him and whispered, "The believers of the Maiden of Pain are actually very annoying. Because you have a specialty that resists pain and torture, normal torture is basically useless to you. When I was in the Underdark, I saw many priests of the Queen of Spiders being helpless against you. However, I know of a method that is quite useful for you guys. It just so happens that I once learned this method from someone." "Do you know what it is?" Soren approached the other party's ear. This strange whisper increased the psychological pressure on the other party, making him feel uneasy. His whole body twisted, desperately trying to stay away from him. Soren smiled, but he looked like a demon. He whispered, "Skinning? My skills are actually not very good. The best skills are in the abyss and hell and then the underdark. But I think my skills will be better than the executioners in the mortal world. After all, I have received professional training. Do you know the underdark? It's the territory of the drows. They are masters of torture, and some of their methods are even crueler than the demons. Skinning is a delicate job. Only when you can peel off a complete human skin can you be considered a beginner. When I was a bitch, the drow who trained me was a master of torture. Do you know what he was wearing? It was a very powerful legendary equipment, stronger than many knight armor. That thing was called human skin magic armor. Only the most evil people who are destined to fall into the abyss of hell after death would wear this thing. He told me for a qualified skinner, after you peel off a complete set of human skin, your work still needs to be alive. That's the real standard. Actually, I'm not sure if I can let you live, but you should be able to live for a while. After all, I have extraordinary dexterity, and there's a grade 3 priest outside. Soren's voice was so low that only the person next to him could hear it. The people standing in the distance could not hear anything. The young man who was hung up was trembling all over, and the fear in his eyes grew stronger. He opened his mouth to say something, but his mouth was gagged. In fact, he could only make muffled sounds. Soren raised his curved sword and looked at the other party with a smile as if he was chatting with a friend. Actually, I would never do this kind of thing in the past. Unfortunately, you made me lower my bottom line a little today because I'm really angry. Very, very angry. It's said that the followers of the goddess of torture enjoy pain. I don't know if you'll be able to enjoy the process. I know that you have good endurance and I don't think you'll tell me what I want to know. But it's okay. I'm an honest person. I think it's better to let you experience my skills first, and then decide whether to tell me or not. Right? Soren raised his curved sword expressionlessly, and then slowly but steadily cut along the top of the person's head. He did not use much strength, but his hand was very steady. He steadily cut from the scalp all the way to the back of the neck, and then from the skin on the spine all the way to the end of the spine. He steadily cut the first line. The victim's body was trembling, and the fear in his eyes almost completely covered the pain. He struggled with all his might, but he still felt the skin on his back being cut open. It was no longer just pain, and the pain was not as terrible as he imagined. The real horror was not the pain that was inflicted on him. The other people present seemed to have realized something. The sheriff's face changed slightly, and he turned his head away, not daring to look at Soren again. Don't move. Soren gently choked his neck and said slowly, if you move, the work will not be complete. This is just the back, next will be the arms and thighs. It is said that a skilled skinner can peel off the scalp first and then deal with the other parts. I don't have such skills, so I can only deal with the other parts first, and let you see the other parts of your body. Blood dripped down drop by drop. Some of the guards could not stand it anymore, and they turned around and ran outside, as if they would have nightmares if they looked at it any longer. Soren carefully cut along the victim's arm and then looked up at him. The victim's mouth was making muffled sounds, and his eyes were full of fear and begging. He said lightly, "It seems like you want to say something?" The victim nodded desperately and he used a lot of strength. Very good. Soren slowly put away his curved sword and then said, "This work is actually very tiring, so it's good that you are willing to talk." Snap. Soren snapped his fingers and removed the rag from the victim's mouth and said to the back, "Ask the priest to come in. He is willing to talk." The sheriff's body stiffened, and then he walked outside. He did not know why his legs were trembling and he almost fell to the ground. Sauron slowly retracted his scimitar with his back facing the victim. His hands were trembling slightly. But soon he took a deep breath, and all his emotions gradually calmed down. P.S. I have been updating twice for the past 2 days, so I will continue to update after I recover. Chapter 137. Amidst the snowstorm. A graceful figure wearing a snow-white mink coat slowly moved forward. Her footsteps were so light that there was almost no trace of her footsteps on the snow. When the bone-chilling wind and icy snowflakes approached her body, they seemed to have hit an invisible barrier and scattered around her. This was the wizard's protective energy field. Perhaps only high-grade wizards could use spell slots so extravagantly. This woman wore very little. Apart from the mink coat on her body, she only wore a close-fitting snow-white robe, revealing the exquisite outline of her delicate body. She wore black silk stockings on her legs. At a glance, one could tell that it wasn't silk from the surface world. The protective energy field could block the cold wind and ice, but it could not block the cold weather of the entire natural world. If she was not a professional with a strong physique, then she must have cast a spell to resist it. Damn droll. The woman's appearance was quite coquettish. If Soren was here, he would feel that she was vaguely familiar, but he might not be able to recognize her because her hair had turned lavender, and her pupils had turned blue. Her whole person was very different from before. However, some characteristics were still retained, such as the tone of voice, the fragrance on her body, and the stockings on her legs. Even high-grade wizards would not have too many enchanted stockings made of spider silk from the Underdark. This was Gloria's mother, the coquettish and vicious woman. She walked on the cold snowfield, wiped the sweat on her forehead, and then looked up at the sky. It seemed that she wanted to cast a spell to fly. This damn weather. The coquettish woman cursed angrily and then continued to move forward. The weather was too cold and the wind was too cold. Casting a spell to fly required a protective spell. The higher she flew, the more piercing the wind would be. Even a high-grade witch like her couldn't use spells without any scruples. She had to reserve a spell slot to protect her life in battle. There seemed to be a sound coming from afar. The coquettish woman looked back and said with hatred, "These guys are like ghosts that won't go away. You don't care about the disciples of fear, but you chased me for half of the world. Didn't I already say that I won't continue the forbidden experiment? Wait till I get back my experimental subject, I'll definitely teach you a lesson." The light of a spell appeared. The coquettish woman's speed suddenly increased. Even though she was merely taking ordinary steps, it was as if she was running at full speed. Her speed was almost comparable to a professional athlete's 100-meter dash. The cold wind grew stronger and stronger. An eagle was forced to fall from the sky. In the face of nature, professionals were not fearless. The eagle that Droll transformed into could not fly as he wished in this kingdom of ice and snow. In the face of nature's might, even legends would be helpless. The druid landed and paused for a moment. Then he frowned and looked into the distance, muttering, "Where did that destroyer of nature run off to? We can't let her go. Her existence is a disaster to the natural world." The three legendary Droll legends working together could not repair the damage she had left behind. She was now at the top of the Droll's blacklist. As long as it was a place where she had conducted magic experiments, there would be terrible energy radiation left behind. She was like a human-shaped self-propelled nuclear fusion radiator. In recent hundreds of years, no one had destroyed the natural environment more than she did. The cold wind was getting colder and colder. The coquettish woman walked dozens of kilometers away. Suddenly she seemed to feel something. She cast a spell on herself, and then the outline of an eye, which was invisible to the naked eye, made of light appeared above her. The next moment her expression changed slightly. She first said a northern dialect which meant something like holy sh*t, then she murmured, "The knight in silver? This group of stubborn people don't really hate me that much, do they? Not only did they send a quasi-legendary level Droll to kill me, they even invited the knight in silver?" She wanted to use teleportation spells, but teleportation spells could not be used indiscriminately. If a wizard did not prepare the teleportation coordinates in advance, it was possible to die by teleporting indiscriminately. If you were teleported into a rock, the rock would not automatically give way to you. There were only two results. One was that you hit the rock at an extreme speed. The speed of the space channel was very close to the speed of light. No matter how slow you were, you would be smashed to pieces. The other was the deviation of the spell. You were teleported into a rock. You were here and the rock was here. Your body was merged with the rock. There had always been a lack of wizards who had just learned teleportation spells and lost their lives. Short-distance teleportation was still possible, but the longer the distance, the higher the requirement for the teleportation mark. This was something that even gods could not avoid. On a towering mountain, the proud figure of the knight in silver stood in front of the steep mountain wall. Her face was not very good. Presumably, no one would be in a good mood if they let a grade 3 rogue escape when they had the strength close to the legendary realm. At first, the tracking was relatively smooth, but after entering the ice area, it was completely broken. The other party seemed to have no rest at all. No matter how she tracked, she could only barely keep up. These days had made her a little tired, and the traces of the target were almost completely covered by the wind and snow. The longer the time dragged on, the more the energy of the leaf of life would be consumed. Even if the rogue was found, it would be impossible to retrieve the precious sacred object. This was a great loss for the Droll, and it was the same for the Elven Kingdom. The leaf of life had the most ancient energy. Although this energy was not powerful, it was very rare. It was also the only way to make their divine tree have divinity. The existence of the Elven main god had become more and more inactive over the years, and many people had a trace of dissatisfaction in their hearts. Many high-grade Droll and Elven elders thought that the most ancient faith should be restored and their divine tree should become a real god. The High Elven Divine Tree Faith. This plan had been stalled for thousands of years. The progress had been very slow because of the interference of the Elven divine system. But recently, all the gods had fallen into a deep sleep, and the Elven main god could not connect with the priests. This was tantamount to a sudden opportunity. Many Droll thought that this was the best time to resurrect the divine tree. Although the divine tree did not die, its spirituality had long disappeared in the years. At this juncture, an accident happened to the remaining 3 leaves of life, and one of them was lost. Time was changing, customs were changing, and beliefs were changing. Suddenly, the knight in silver seemed to have discovered something. Her sharp eyes looked down at her feet like an eagle, and then there was a strange expression on her face. She seemed to have seen a very notorious witch among the elves. Northern Tower. Gloria stood at the top of the wizard tower, hundreds of meters high. The cold wind blew her long hair, and there were strands of silver in her silky long hair. It inexplicably gave her a sense of beauty that had settled down over the years. She looked down at the land under her feet, like a queen, and the area within 120 kilometers was her territory. As a high-grade member of the Witch Council, the Northern Witch who was most likely to advance to the legendary realm, she had touched the edge of the quasi-legendary realm before the age of 30. It was not impossible for her to reach the peak of the legendary realm in the future. In the distance, busy fishermen could be seen. It was the migration of the winter scale fish. Their habits were special. They would only lay eggs in spring. October was the harvest season. The fishermen would catch them with the size of the net and then let go of the small fish that had not yet grown up. For them, Gloria was a superior existence, and they were more in awe than the city lord of Moon River City. Gloria looked down at the people under her feet, opened her palm to catch a snowflake and then sighed faintly. The weather was getting colder and colder. She tightened the wizard robe on her body and turned to walk into the tower. The heavy iron statue stood in front of the door and said with a voice of metal friction, "Master. The observation target is still sleeping, but the energy is also very stable. The things that were destroyed at the beginning have been repaired." On the 12th floor of the wizard tower, Vivian's small figure was lying on a platform covered with soft velvet. There was an oval protective cover outside. Gloria walked to a magic circle, and her figure appeared directly outside the door. She then glanced at the little girl who was breathing evenly on the platform and frowned. She had been sleeping for a long time. She did not need to eat, but she did not wake up. Occasionally, there would be unconscious energy spreading, and it even almost alarmed the Witch Council. The place where she was first placed had been destroyed. The violent divine power almost shattered her wizard tower into 2 pieces. If she had not activated the protective spell in time, Vivian could have destroyed half of the wall. The little girl's power was amazing. Gloria estimated that she had surpassed the level of a high-grade legend, profession level 25. Unless there was a way to separate these energies, she would need to sleep for a long time. Her body was too small and too young. But the power in her body was already stronger than an adult dragon. Unless she changed from a mortal to a demon, she could not integrate this power. The Son of God could transform his form. If Vivian changed into a high-grade demon or a descendant of a demon, she should be able to integrate this power. But the little girl seemed to have been resisting and fighting against this power. She was still a mortal, without any characteristics of a high-grade demon or a demon of the abyss. Gloria did not know how to let a mortal absorb such a huge amount of divine power. She was at her wit's end. As a northern witch close to the legendary level, Gloria was not a legendary wizard after all. She had not touched such a mysterious field. Unless she advanced to the legendary level, she could not even analyze the structure of divine power. The Frost Kingdom. Soren came out with a gloomy expression, and the middle-aged female priest also came out with a stiff face. The others looked very dignified and no one spoke for a long time. The news they got was terrible. Because not only did the believers of the goddess of torture come here, but even her chosen came to the Frost Kingdom. The chosen of the gods. A natural legendary profession. She seemed to have come from the Underdark and had some drow features, but no one had seen her face clearly. She was a wizard with great power. She also came here more than half a month ago. He used a month to walk the path that others took 10 years, but the enemies he had to face were thousands of years ahead of him. The sky gradually darkened. There were signs of unrest in the town, but Soren didn't care about it. He rested in the inn while training his will. He wanted to complete the cultivation of an ascetic. As a foreign adventurer, Soren did not need to fight on the front line against these fallen ones. The followers of the gods were not to be trifled with. If he was not careful, he might fail miserably. There were very few ways to gain slaughter EXP in a short period of time. The distribution of living creatures was quite spread out. Killing people indiscriminately would only lead to destruction, and it would also cause him to completely lose his way. The slaughter EXP given by ordinary creatures was too little. It was too difficult to solo a group in the wilderness, and killing them bit by bit was too time-consuming. According to the normal progress, Soren estimated that he would need at least 7 days to get enough EXP to level up. He needed to absorb divinity. Soren was ready to fight against the will of the Dread Lord and devour the divinity that was separated from his soul. But this required a very strong will. The night passed quickly. Soren slept very well that night. It could be said that he had completely replenished his energy. When he walked out the next day, he looked very different from before. He took off his leather armor and warm cotton clothes. He was only wearing the thinnest linen clothes. His shoulder-length hair was loose and his bare feet were not wearing shoes. He walked directly on the cold snow. Asceticism. It was the best way to train one's will. A strong will was honed and accumulated over time. A person's will would not change just because of one's decision. It was the accumulation of one's will as one persevered. Soren stepped on the snow with his bare feet. The cold wind blew through his clothes, but the thin linen was useless. Even with his 21 constitution, he could not resist the cold from all directions. The other people in the town looked at him with strange eyes. Their expressions were as if they were looking at a madman or a fool. Even if the northerners were naturally resistant to cold, it would not take long for them to get sick wearing such thin clothes outside. Soren came to the Temple of Agriculture. His appearance surprised the priest and she bowed slightly. She knew what Soren was going to do because other priests would do the same. The only thing that surprised her was that she could not understand why rogues would use such an extreme way to train their will. They did not need to rely on will to stabilize their faith like priests did. Most of the rogues were believers and they would at most talk about the gods. Soren received the reward he deserved. It was only a small amount of gold coins, about 30 gold coins. Then there was a part of the holy water, and the most important 2 bottles of greater healing potion. It was worth more than 500 kindler, and its effect was equivalent to healing moderate injuries to severe injuries. The priest was an expert in this field. Soren continued his journey. He wore thin linen clothes and stepped on the cold snow barefoot. He moved forward step by step without using any supernatural abilities or spells. He just walked forward step by step. The pervasive cold penetrated his body. His arms, cheeks, and feet soon began to turn slightly blue. Because he did not have shoes to protect him, there were also slight scars on the soles of his feet. The ground was very rough. There were stones, dead branches, and inconspicuous spikes because it was a coniferous forest outside. The frostbite was gradually accumulating. Although the speed of increase was very slow, the number of frostbite was still steadily increasing. Because of the scars on his feet, Soren also had slight bruises. These injuries gradually reduced his HP little by little. The first day, Soren walked barefoot for 150 kilometers. He met a hungry white bear, but it died under his sword. Night fell. He did not drink a drop of water for the whole day. He only drank a little water at this time, and then slowly ate dry food. There was no meat at all, only the coarsest black bread. The frostbite all over his body was very obvious. His HP had already decreased by more than 10 points. If it wasn't for his regeneration talent as well as his extraordinary vitality of over 20 points, he would have frozen to death in just 1 day. Even the weak cold resistance could not offset all the frostbite in this environment. Soren did not make a bonfire. He sat on a rock, held his curved sword with both hands and then slowly closed his eyes. This was the training method of a sword saint. He was meditating, but he was not training his mind like a wizard. Instead, he was training his will. The howling cold wind did not stop for a moment. Occasionally, snowflakes would fall on Soren's body. The snow melted little by little, and then froze into ice due to the cold temperature. Soren sat on the rock without moving. His whole body looked like an ice sculpture. Only the heart in his chest was still beating slowly and steadily. The night slowly passed. When Soren opened his eyes the next day, his body was already covered in white frost. His whole body was bruised. When he retracted his curved sword, some of his flesh was even cut off. His hand that was in contact with the blade was already frozen. A night of meditation made his whole body stiff. The frostbite on his body had accumulated to more than 50 points, almost a third of his HP. He slowly got up, drank some cold water and then began to eat. He moved his body slightly. Today there were no monsters that didn't know what was good for them. After moving around, Soren's skin was slightly red. He drank a bottle of healing potion and felt a warm current flowing through his body. The healing potion could not heal his wounds quickly. After a short rest, Soren continued on his journey. He was still wearing thin clothes. He walked barefooted on the ice and snow. He walked slowly along the path. Occasionally he would meet other people. They looked at him in disbelief as if they were looking at a madman. The second day, the third day, the fourth day. As time passed, Soren's body became thinner and thinner. He looked more and more tired. The frostbite on his body had accumulated to the point that his flesh started to crack. However, the light in his eyes became more and more solid, like a sharp blade buried in the ice. He slaughtered a pack of snow wolves, killed 3 earth spirit bugbears, and even fought with an ice troll for a short time. Soren walked less and less every day because he was really tired. He came across a few human villages on the way, but he did not stop. He just quietly walked past them. The 5th day, the 6th day, the 7th day. Soren's lips were completely cracked. His body was full of shocking frostbite. He no longer looked as handsome as he did at the beginning. His walking posture was slightly inconvenient because he had drunk all the healing potions. The accumulated frostbite eventually dragged him into a seriously injured state. He came across a large pack of wolves. Because of the bloody smell from the frostbite, the alpha wolf bit him on the leg. The wound could not heal until now. The Frost Kingdom was always so cold. Soren walked barefooted in this world of ice and snow for more than 1,000 miles. When a city in ice and snow appeared in front of him, he finally received the long-awaited ability prompt. Barefooted for 1,000 miles. Although Soren was very weak at this moment, it was also his strongest moment. Life and death were decided at this moment. Chapter 139. The Northern Tower. The ice on the river was already very thick. Some children in the north cut through the ice to fish. When they caught something, they would take it back and roast it. Children at this age were more gluttonous. However, they did not dare to get close to the tower. It was a forbidden area for others. They had been warned by their parents not to disturb the mysterious northern witches. Occasionally, they would look in that direction with envious gazes, hoping that they would one day become a powerful adept. Gloria was buried in a pile of notes and books. In front of her were dense text symbols. She had been in the laboratory for 3 days. Occasionally, she would sleep here when she was tired. From time to time, she would go to see Vivian's situation. She was ready to break through to the legendary level of the Northern Witch. During this time, she had begun to explore deeper into the magic network and study the 9th circle high-level spells. If she successfully completed a 9th circle spell, she would enter the realm of quasi-legendary. As long as she was given a little more time, she would steadily be promoted to the level of a legendary witch. Suddenly, Gloria seemed to feel something. She raised her head from the tall pile of books, reached out to take off her crystal glasses, and frowned as she glanced outside. Her eyesight was actually very good, but she would wear delicate silver-rimmed crystal glasses when she was researching spells. This was an extraordinary level enchanted tool that could help her study spell models. Gloria seemed to feel something. She stood up excitedly and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Vivian. She looked at the little girl who had just opened her eyes in surprise. Because she had slept for too long, she was still a little confused. She rubbed her eyes with her little white hands and then said half awake, "Sister Gloria? Did I sleep for a long time? Why do I feel a little dizzy?" Gloria hugged the little Vivian, leaned over and kissed her forehead. Then she slowly said, "You have been in a coma for almost half a month." "Brother." The little girl seemed to remember something and said in a panic, "Where is brother? Isn't he here?" Gloria fell silent. She raised her fingers and ran them through her long hair. There were strands of silver in it. She murmured, "Soren got separated from us. But he should be fine. You don't have to worry too much." Vivian fell silent. Then the little girl looked up at Gloria and said doubtfully, "That's not right. I just saw Big Brother." This answer puzzled Gloria. She frowned and asked, "You saw Soren?" "Here. Impossible. This entire tower is under my detection. If Soren is here, there's no way I wouldn't know." You seem to have thought of something. Gloria's face suddenly turned slightly pale, and a trace of sadness appeared in her eyes. Was Soren really dead? If he was a spirit, it was possible that she didn't notice him. Could it be that Soren's ghost had appeared here for a moment because of his strong obsession? Gloria tightly hugged Vivian in front of her. She suddenly felt that her nose was a little sore, and she felt inexplicably sad. She didn't know why, but recently she would occasionally think of the man named Soren. As a noble northern witch, she rarely thought of anyone on her own initiative. Even if it was her mother, she only thought of them occasionally. Now, she thought of a man every few days and worried about whether he had survived or not. Gloria's heart was a little unclear. This was not the love that ordinary people spoke of, but it did not seem to be a simple friendship either. She actually remembered that man, as if he was a family member that she had known for a long time and had been with for a long time. Was it a dream? The little girl rubbed her head and said to herself, "I seem to have had a lot of dreams." These words were like spring returning to the earth, and Gloria was inexplicably happy again. She was a little annoyed as she bumped Vivian's little head with her forehead, and then asked, "What did you dream of?" The little girl closed her eyes and recalled for a moment, then murmured, "I dreamed of a lot of scary things. There was fire and blood everywhere. They were near me, but I wasn't afraid of them because as long as I wasn't afraid of them, they couldn't get close to me. I also dreamed of a very scary person. He seemed to be my father." No. No. He's not my father, he's a very powerful and terrible thing. I don't know what it is. He kept telling me to be obedient. He wanted me to submit to him. There seemed to be another voice. I don't know who it was. She said she was me and her name was Lillian. I won't submit to them. I'm Vivian. I'm my brother's Vivian. Brother? Right? I also dreamed of my brother. He had a lot of injuries on his body. My heart ached when I saw him. I couldn't stop my tears. I desperately called out to him. But my brother didn't seem to hear me. The little girl's voice trembled slightly, and Gloria could not help but feel her heart clench, because she knew that this might not be just a dream. Vivian closed her eyes, and there was a trace of sparkling tears at the corner of her eyes. She murmured, "Brother seemed to have walked a lot. He seemed to have come from a very, very far away place. His injuries were very serious and he looked very tired. I don't know how long he had been walking. Suddenly he walked past me one day and I still desperately called out to him, but my brother didn't seem to hear me. The ground he walked on was covered with ice and snow. I saw the ground under my brother's feet freeze into ice, and it suddenly became very cold. I was so cold that I was shivering and my tears were about to freeze. Brother's body was covered with ice and frost, and the ground he walked on was frozen. The howling cold wind caused heavy snow to fall. The cold wind and snow extinguished the flames, and all the blood was frozen into ice. My brother looked very tired, but he didn't stop walking. He didn't hear my voice either. He just kept walking forward, getting closer and closer. Finally, he arrived in front of the monsters and demons. Brother pulled out his sword. Those monsters that got close to him were all frozen into ice sculptures. Brother killed those demons. He kept walking forward. Then he walked to the front of that terrifying monster. I heard the monsters roar and I felt very scared. But brother kept walking forward. He still didn't stop. He just walked to the front of that monster and then cut off its head with one swing of his sword. I felt the whole world shaking and many things were shaking. Brother didn't seem to hear me and he just disappeared. And then? Vivian raised her little head and murmured, "And then I woke up." "Sister Gloria? Big brother, did you kill those demons and save me?" I feel like brother must know that Vivian is trapped there. Then he walked a very, very long way to save me. Although he couldn't hear my voice, I feel like brother knows that I'm here. Right. Before brother disappeared, he looked at me. He smiled. He seemed to want to say something, but before he could say anything, he disappeared. Gloria fell silent. She lowered her head and kissed Vivian. As if she was relieved, she murmured, "Yes, Vivian. It should be Soren who came to save you. You should be fine. He's still alive. A man who could make me pay such a high price for a divination wouldn't die so quietly." Gloria's voice became softer and softer, and in the end, it was almost inaudible. Vivian raised her little head and looked at Gloria with her beautiful big eyes. Then she stretched out her little hands and hugged her, burying her little head into her chest. She rubbed her head like a little puppy and murmured, "Sister Gloria. Sometimes I feel like you're very much like my mother. Even the smell is very similar." Gloria couldn't help but laugh. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She opened her mouth and bit Vivian's tender little face. She muttered, "Mischievous girl. I'm not that old. Call me sister, don't call me mother." "Oh." Vivian shrank her head and murmured, "Don't bite people." Brother said that only little dogs bite people. Outside the tower. The cold wind was still howling, but it seemed that the coldest time had passed. What they needed to do now was to wait for the arrival of spring. That was the hope of life. Chapter 140. The faint light woke up Soren from his deep sleep. The first thing he did when he opened his eyes was to get up and reach for the weapon next to him. When his hand touched the curved sword next to him, his expression relaxed a little. A series of memories began to appear in his mind. He walked for a long time and saw a city. Although he was very tired, he finally reached the peak of his will. The journey was like sharpening a knife. When Soren was the most tired, his will, spirit, and aura were condensed to the peak. Then he chose to fuse with the divinity without hesitation, and then he seemed to be dragged into a very realistic dream. Soren seemed to see a lot of demons, but there was only one thought in his mind, and that was to kill any creature that dared to stop him. He didn't know how many he killed, but when he finally relaxed, all the demons, including the will of the demon god, were killed by him. He could vaguely hear Vivian's cries, but unfortunately, he fainted before he could get a good look at her. The fatigue and injuries that had accumulated over the past 7 days finally exploded the moment he relaxed, and he felt as if his whole body had fallen into darkness. If he was too tense, he might break. Soren used his strong will to hold on until the last moment, but when he killed the will of the demon god and heard Vivian's voice, he felt that she was still alive. All of a sudden, all the fatigue hit him. From the moment he was separated from the hunters until now, Soren's nerves suddenly relaxed, and the result was that he directly fainted. He fainted in a world of ice and snow, lying in the cold snow on the side of an unknown city. Soren slowly stood up. He had changed his clothes and everything was neatly placed next to him. It seemed that no one had opened them. The wounds all over his body had almost recovered. He didn't know if it was because of the effect of fusing with the divinity, or because someone had treated him. Maybe it was because of both, because the accumulated frostbite had dragged him into a state of serious injury. It was very difficult for such a serious injury to recover in a short period of time. It should be the next day. Soren's intuition told him that he hadn't been unconscious for too long. There were sounds of human activity outside. He looked at the room in front of him. The furnishings were simple but solemn. They were all made of thick logs. This was the most common house in the north. The owner should be a citizen with a decent family background and a decent status. There were few fires in the Frost Kingdom because of the cold climate. The trees here were tall and made good wood for building houses. He took off his clothes, which seemed to belong to another man. The material was coarse and the man was probably taller than him. Soren changed back into his own clothes, then opened his multi-dimensional bag to take a look. There were almost no traces of it being touched. Someone must have saved him. He brought Soren here after he fainted, and it seemed like the other party had a good character. He didn't even touch his belongings. Such people were extremely rare. Someone seemed to have heard the sound in the room. Heavy footsteps came from outside, and then a northern woman who looked a little round came in. She was about 30 years old and she might be a little obese. She weighed more than 200 pounds, but her face was very kind. She seemed to be quite easy to get along with. "You're awake." The rather fat northern woman smiled and said, "You've been unconscious for a day." Soren bowed slightly to express his gratitude and said, "Did you save me? Don't worry, I'll give you what you deserve." "No, no." The fat woman waved her hand and glanced at the curved sword in his hand. She seemed to be a little scared. Soren quickly put down the sword. The woman's expression was obviously much more natural. She smiled on her fat face and said, "It was a noble lady who saved you. She seems to be a noble of high status. Her maid asked me to take good care of you and spent money to hire a priest to treat you. She's really a kind noble lady. I haven't seen such a kind noble for many years." "Noble?" Soren frowned slightly and then said, "Where is she? Maybe I should express my gratitude to her and then return the kindler that she spent." The fat woman smiled and replied, "She left yesterday. She didn't even leave her name. She also told me not to touch your things. She said that adventurers like you are probably more fierce. But it seems that you're quite kind like my nephew. Everything is over there. I just put it there and didn't touch it." Speaking of this, her tone was a little heavier. It seemed that she didn't want to cause any unnecessary misunderstanding. "Left?" Soren was a little stunned and then asked, "Where did she go?" It seemed that he was really lucky to have met such a good person who didn't ask for anything in return. "Seems to have gone to Arendelle." The northern woman smiled and said, "It seems that her status is very high. There are a lot of guards around her. I feel that she is more powerful than the governor of Ice River. You should be hungry, right? Shall I get you something to eat? Soren nodded slightly and thanked her. Thank you. The plump woman quickly turned around and left. Solon began to tidy up his things, putting them away one by one. None of them seemed to have been touched, and he did not notice that anything was missing. The injuries on his body healed quickly, and it was possible that what the woman said was true. However, Soren really didn't remember who saved him. Someone must have passed by and found him unconscious on the side of the road and brought him here. He looked at his data display and found that there were a lot of things. Weak cold resistance, personal ability. In the process of resisting the cold, you will become more and more resistant to cold environments. You will adapt to most cold climates, and your resistance to special cold environments will also be greatly improved. From now on, you are immune to any cold damage below 3 points. When attacked by magic or spell-like attacks, any damage with cold effects will be reduced by 3 points. Soren's cold resistance had improved. After accumulating hundreds of frostbite effects, he finally mastered the ability, weak cold resistance. Then, there was another very important ability. Ascetic, personal ability. You have tried to sharpen your will in an extreme environment. While resisting the cold, pain and danger of death, your will has also been further tempered. You used your strong will to resist the extreme environment. In the process, your will gradually became as strong as steel. When facing any test of will, you will gain 3 points in your cultivation. Will +3, the prerequisite for the ascetic's advancement. Soren naturally wouldn't advance into an ascetic. He had come all this way to train himself. When his will was at its peak, he would be able to resist the will of the demon god in the divinity. If he gave up halfway or even had the thought of giving up, Soren would give up the fusion. But in the end he persevered. As the divinity was fused, Soren also had an extra line of data. 3/10, weak divinity. 10 points of divinity was needed to upgrade to weak divinity. Soren couldn't get any attribute bonus from divinity for the time being, but he had gained some special abilities. Gaze of Fear, innate ability. You have successfully fused with the divinity of fear. When you concentrate your will to exert fear, anyone who looks at you will feel a trace of fear under your gaze. They must pass a test of will with a difficulty of 10 plus divinity. Otherwise, anyone who looks at you will be affected by the effect of fear. Fear was a level 0 spell. Soren's innate ability was equivalent to casting fear on any target without limit. If the opponent's will wasn't strong enough, they might be scared to death. This ability was effective against ordinary people, but it wasn't very effective against professionals. Then, there was the second innate ability. Fear, innate ability. You have successfully fused with the divinity of fear. You can cast fear once a day. Any creature within 30 feet must be forced to undergo a test of will. The difficulty of the test is equivalent to your casting level and spell power. Any creature that can't pass the test will feel extreme fear and will have emotional reactions such as giving up resistance, running away in panic, trembling in despair, and so on. It is possible to directly kill some weak targets. The number of times this innate ability can be used increases with divinity. Fear was the most important ability of the divinity. Soren looked at the additional instant spells and finally showed a trace of satisfaction on his face. There were quite a few magic skills that could determine the target's willpower, from level 0 fear, level 1 panic, level 2 group panic, level 3 fear, all the way to the higher level robe of fear, command, fear, holy word, fear, and so on. These types of spells had very powerful control abilities. If one couldn't pass the test of will, they were almost done for. What Soren cared about the most wasn't the power of the spells, but that most of the spells brought by divinity were instant. What was instant? It was when Soren raised his hand and pointed. He didn't even need to point and cast fear, and then the opponent would be forced to undergo a test of will. How would one's body react when one's will was fighting against fear? Unless one's will was completely resistant to fear, there would be a short period of reaction time. Soren had been hit by a level 3 fear before. His heartbeat suddenly began to accelerate as if he was severely frightened. Even if he passed the test of will, he still took a while to recover. If he didn't pass the test, the target of fear would completely collapse. The most common reaction was to run away, tremble all over, or give up resistance. There was a possibility that they would be scared to death. Fear could also kill. It was normal for a level 3 spell to scare a timid person to death. Chapter 141. It was a very powerful instant cast spell. But this was not the most powerful ability brought by the evil divinity. There was an even more abnormal instant spell in Soren's innate ability. The most common innate spell of the evil divinity was Vampiric Touch. Vampiric Touch, innate ability. You have successfully fused with the divinity of fear. When activating this innate ability, you can condense negative energy to erode the enemy's life force and temporarily transfer it to your body. After activating this ability, any enemy that is touched by you will lose 3 spell strength, HP. A maximum of 60 HP will be absorbed. This HP will be transferred to your body and heal your injuries. If it exceeds your HP, this HP will be retained for 1 hour, increasing your maximum HP. The effect of this spell cannot be stacked. The enemy may die directly because of the exhaustion of their HP. This was Vampiric Touch. It was one of the most powerful low-grade spells of the necromancy system. Soren could now use this innate ability to absorb more than 30 HP from the enemy at one time. This HP could be used to heal his injuries. If he was not injured, it would be stacked on his body as a temporary HP, and it would last for 1 hour. If he were to be injured in the future, this temporary life force would be the first to be consumed and used to heal his injuries. This spell was difficult for wizards to use. Because wizards had to fight from a distance, it was difficult to touch the enemy after getting close to them. But for a rogue like Soren, touching the enemy was a very simple matter. Instant cast touch. Vampiric Touch began to take effect. The enemy's HP was reduced by more than 30 HP, while Soren's HP was increased by more than 30. This was equivalent to more than 60 HP, which was equivalent to an instant cast heal. The abilities of the divinity were more complicated. First was the attribute bonus brought by the divinity itself. Soren still needed 7 points of divinity. If he had enough, he could upgrade to minor divinity, which would increase all his attributes by 1. The second was the innate ability brought by the divinity. These abilities were changed according to the divinity itself. For example, the divinity of the good faction was mostly divine healing, blessings, buffs, and so on. The divinity of the evil faction was basically all damage spells, as well as negative energy absorption spells. The fear divinity would definitely have the talent of fear, and then there would be the vampiric touch brought about by the evil alignment divinity. Soren had suffered a lot because of this before. In a moment of carelessness, Shifeng had been struck by the other party, instantly losing over 50 HP. Shifeng had entered a heavily injured state on the spot, while the other party had basically recovered from his injuries. This innate ability was the main reason why he took the risk to absorb the divinity. The vampiric touch had the ability to turn the situation around. Even if Soren was up against a high-grade professional, he wouldn't be afraid in a direct battle. That was the difference between gods and mortals. Basically, all spells below level 6 could be instantly cast by gods who descended in the form of saints. Some powerful gods could even instantly cast level 9 spells. They had so many specialties that it made one's scalp tingle. Soren slowly walked out. There were 2 or 3 northern men who were chatting outside. Their skin was whiter, but their pores were thick and their hair was exuberant. Their physiques were obviously stronger than those of the southerners. This was a grocery store, and it seemed that they also sold some wine and food. There should be some spare rooms upstairs. Anyway, it was a place where most of the ordinary businesses had a little bit of money. Soren saw 3 children who looked a little similar. 2 boys and 1 girl were younger, and their little faces were a little chubby. They should be their children. To raise 3 children at the same time, it was indeed necessary to make as much money as possible. Soren nodded slightly. He looked at the man outside, reached out and took out 10 kindlers from his pocket, and then handed them to the man who was obviously the shop owner. No need for so much. It's too much. The tall northern man was a little embarrassed and murmured, "That noble lady has already paid. She directly paid for your accommodation and food for a week." Soren smiled and said, "Take it. Take this money as my thanks." The finances of the commoners were not very rich, but there were not many places where they spent money. Otherwise, adventurers would not be able to earn enough money to retire for the rest of their lives. 10 kindlers was not a small amount of money for them. It was enough for their 3 children to pay their tuition fees and learn to read from a scholar for a year, and to master some of the most basic knowledge. The chubby shop owner's wife was obviously winking at him. The northern man hesitated for a moment, but still took the 10 kindlers. He had only earned so much in 2 or 3 months. "Thank you very much." Soren nodded slightly, then turned and walked outside. This seemed to be the edge of Glacier City. Tall city walls could be seen in the distance. There were many areas scattered around the city, and they were considered outsiders. They were not from the countryside, but they were not from the city either. There was still a lot of ice and snow on the road, but they could see young children fishing by the side. There was a river on the right of Glacier City, and it was already frozen. There were very few fish in the river. This place had been overfished and there were basically no fish left. Soren looked up at the sky, then walked into the city. He wanted to sell some jewelry as well as his spoils of war, replenish his supplies, and buy a few magic scrolls that he needed. Although he felt that Vivian was very safe, Soren still wanted to see her as soon as possible. Without her by his side, he always felt empty. On a wide road, the coachman drove a specially made carriage forward. There were 7 or 8 fully armed knights following him. They were obviously skilled guards. They were riding short northern horses. These horses were not big and they were very hairy. They were not as strong as the southern horses, but their endurance was top-notch. The pack beasts used here had already adapted to the environment, and occasionally, one could see strong reindeer. The northern horses were expensive, and they were more expensive than the southern horses. Only the wealthy nobles could use them. Granny Glina. A girl's clear voice came from the gorgeous carriage. She seemed to be complaining, "Why didn't you let me take that man with me? He looks like a very powerful adventurer. Maybe he's also a good storyteller?" The books say that there are many stories about such adventurers. Then a serious female voice slowly said, "Your Highness Anna, you should watch your words. You should pay attention to your words and deeds. You are noble and represent the dignity of Arendelle. You shouldn't stay with those greedy, dirty, and murderous adventurers. If there is no law, these people are likely to become a gang of robbers. You have saved his life. If he hadn't met you, he might have frozen to death in the snow." The girl didn't seem to listen to her at all. She tilted her head and murmured, "The books always say that the princess will meet a knight in distress, and then the knight will fall in love with the princess, and then help her restore her kingdom, fight against the evil bad guys, kill the dragon, and so on. That man may not be a knight, but maybe he's a very powerful adventurer?" Recently, there are often stories about adventurers replacing knights as protagonists in books. "It wasn't easy for me to pick up an adventurer, but you threw him away." The middle-aged woman named Glina seemed to be angry and said with a straight face, "First of all, Arendelle has the powerful Princess Royal, and no one can threaten Arendelle. Secondly, he's not a knight, and he may not even be a powerful adventurer. An experienced adventurer wouldn't put himself in such a difficult situation, and he didn't seem to have encountered any terrible enemies. Finally, Princess Royal is about to ascend the throne. Your Highness Anna, can you imagine what kind of expression Princess Royal will have when she sees an adventurer you picked up from the road? I don't think you want her to be angry, do you?" The pretty girl seemed a little dejected. She played with her ponytail with her white fingers, untied the other side of the ponytail, and tied it into a single ponytail with a delicate hairband. Then she pursed her lips and muttered, "I'm just a little bored. The lives of the princesses in the books are so wonderful, either fighting against terrible demons or defeating powerful dragons. At the very least there's a fantasy adventure. Only I'm locked in my room every day, either learning court etiquette or learning how to manage the kingdom. I'm learning this and that every day. It's so annoying." The more the girl spoke, the angrier she became. She reached out and pulled off the hairband, messing up her beautiful hair. The middle-aged woman next to her also seemed a little helpless and said slowly, "You are one of the 2 most dazzling pearls of Arendelle. After Princess Royal is crowned queen, you will definitely have to manage the kingdom together. I think you should read less of those dirty books. They are completely used by lowly bards to fool ignorant girls." The girl's beautiful eyes widened when she heard this, and her pretty face was angry. She seemed to want to refute the other party, but suddenly the carriage shook, and then the surroundings became strangely quiet. The middle-aged woman protected the girl behind her with amazing agility, then opened the curtain and took a look outside. The coachman was strangely stiff in place, his eyes were moving desperately, his lips slightly wanted to say something but no sound came out. All the guards outside were stiff in place and the horses were like puppets. Group hold, instant cast. A level 9 spell. There were wizards or priests close to the legendary level nearby, using the meta-magic ability, instant cast, to hold the entire convoy in place. Chapter 142. Group hold spell was a level 7 spell. The guards outside were all grade 3 professions and above. To be able to make them not aware of it at all, it must have used a unique technique to perform an instant spell. Instant spell casting required an additional 3 spell levels, which meant that the difficulty of this instant, group hold spell, was equivalent to a legendary spell. After discovering the abnormality outside, The middle-aged woman was sure that they had encountered a legendary wizard or priest. Some priests with special abilities could also use group hold spell. The middle-aged woman didn't even have time to do anything before she saw several black shadows shoot out from both sides of the road. Then a cold light flashed past. These guards of rank 3 and above, and even rank 4, watched helplessly as their enemies slit their throats, dying with their eyes wide open on the bodies of these enemies who were usually no match for them. The legendary existence who secretly cast the spell was of a very high level. The strong will and immunity brought by the spell almost wiped out these high-grade melee professions. They stood in place and couldn't move. Just like that, the enemy pierced their hearts and cut their throats like slaughtering chickens and dogs. The bloody massacre took place outside the carriage. The middle-aged woman's reaction speed was very fast. She almost immediately retracted and opened a scroll. Then she grabbed the pretty girl next to her and prepared to teleport away with her. As the Princess of Arendelle, she must have an extremely expensive teleportation scroll with her, which could be used to escape in a critical moment. The price of such a scroll was outrageous. The cost of just copying the spell could reach tens of thousands of Kindler coins. If it was a long-distance teleportation, the cost might be several times higher. But in the next moment, the middle-aged woman's expression became very unsightly because the magic on the scroll flickered and then disappeared. Dimensional cage. The enemy had already made ample preparations and had sealed off all the nearby dimensional spaces before making a move. Your Highness Anna. The middle-aged woman's expression was a little determined. She pulled out 2 short swords from her legs and then whispered in the girl's ear, "I'll stop them later. You get out of the carriage and run to Glacier City. The Lord of Glacier City is a friend of Arendelle, and there are also legendary professions there." The girl's pretty face was slightly pale. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but the middle-aged woman had activated a certain item, making her figure disappear directly. Greater invisibility. Greater haste. Greater featherweight. Advanced energy protection. Greater mage armor. 5 consecutive spells appeared in an instant, and the girl's figure completely disappeared. The middle-aged woman didn't have time to say anything. She rushed out of the carriage and pounced on the enemies around her. A burst of ice exploded around her. The sharp ice blades cut an enemy into minced meat. Electric arcs that could be seen with the naked eye paralyzed all the enemies within 30 feet of her. Their skin and flesh were scorched by the electricity. The middle-aged woman's movements were abnormally agile. Her dagger instantly slit the throat of an enemy, and then she leaped forward and stabbed the second enemy to death. The curtain of the carriage moved slightly. However, no one could be seen. It was like a gentle breeze, as if something had left. However, there were no footprints on the ground. A ray of magical light suddenly shot towards the empty air. The middle-aged woman shouted, and a magic light suddenly appeared on the button on her body. She moved 3 meters away in the air and blocked the light with her body. She was strangely stiff in place. A masked killer swung a dagger and stabbed her heart, but it stopped when it was 30 centimeters away from her body. Magical energy protection field. The spellcaster, who had been hiding in the dark, finally came out. Her whole body was covered by a black cloak, and one could vaguely see that her ears were sticking up. That was the characteristic of the elf tribe. Their ears were much sharper than that of humans. The spellcaster's waist was wrapped with a snake whip. She frowned and looked at the air in front of her. Then she flew directly out of thin air and blessed herself with true sight. A hazy figure appeared in front of her. At this moment, it was desperately fleeing towards the distance. "You can't escape." The spellcaster's mouth evoked a cruel arc. Then a greater dispel spell broke the middle-aged woman's energy protection field. Then she flew towards the escaping girl at an amazing speed. It was not so easy to escape from the hands of a legendary spellcaster. Even other legendary professions would find it difficult, let alone a human girl. The distance was shortened at an amazing speed. The girl who had cast many spells had just escaped more than 100 meters away when the spellcaster behind the scenes appeared in front of her in a flash. Then he reached out a finger and broke her defensive spell. With a magnetic voice he said, "Command, intimidate." The girl was stiff in place. She was like a delicate puppet, motionless. Only her beautiful eyes could move slightly, revealing a trace of despair in them. A scream sounded in the distance. The middle-aged woman was stabbed in the heart by a masked killer, and then her head was cut off. The head rolled 5 or 6 meters away, and the headless body fell to the ground with a thud. Although she could not move her body at all, the girl seemed to have heard something. Her lips moved slightly but no sound came out. Drops of tears fell from her beautiful big eyes. The other party was too strong. They did not have the ability to resist at all. Mortals were so powerless in the face of a legend. Kill the others. The spellcaster in a black cloak looked at the girl in front of him and said coldly, "Take her away." More than 10 masked men appeared in the vicinity one after another. Some of them took off their black veils, revealing ferocious faces covered with scars. These people looked around coldly, and then 2 of them reached out to grab the girl in front of them. But the moment they reached out to touch the girl, suddenly the wind and snow around them danced. In an instant, a woman who looked very similar to her, except for her hair color, appeared. She was like a queen descending from above. Her figure was strangely suspended 20 centimeters in the air. She raised her hand and pointed forward. Ice finger. The 2 masked men near Princess Anna were instantly stiff. A little ice spread from their hearts, and then covered their whole body in the blink of an eye. Soon they became 2 ice sculptures standing in place. Sister? The pretty girl seemed to have lifted the spell on her body. She cried and pounced on the woman in front of her, but she went straight through the other party's body. The figure of the woman suspended in the air blurred for a moment. The flying snow and ice surrounded her and then reconstituted her body. She looked at the chosen of the Maiden of Pain with a stern gaze. Anna. The Princess Royal, who was full of fierce momentum, did not look back. Instead, she said in a deep voice, "Get out of here quickly. I'll come to you in a minute. Go." The other party did not appear in her true form, but an avatar made of ice and snow. The pretty girl seemed to realize this as well. She gritted her teeth and fled forward. The masked men around her immediately chased after her, but as soon as they made a move, a blue ice spread on the ground. These believers of the Maiden of Pain, who were about grade 3 in strength, were frozen into ice sculptures in an instant. There was no breath of life on their bodies. TSK. The chosen of the Maiden of Pain clapped her hands gently, and her eyes were a little surprised. She is indeed the legendary Princess Royal of Arendelle, the most powerful Destiny warlock in history. Her ice and snow avatar already has the power of a legendary warlock. No wonder the Maiden of Winter asked me to deal with this little girl. So, you should have sensed something by now. Somewhere in Arendelle, the power of winter is spreading. The eldest princess's expression changed slightly. She raised her hand and a stretch of ice spread out. The ice and snow in the surroundings descended like a storm, turning into countless ice blades that enveloped all the space in the vicinity. The other party didn't even have a chance to dodge. He couldn't even evade a teleportation spell and was enveloped by the ice blades that blotted out the sky and earth. Clang, clang. An invisible energy shield emerged, blocking tens of millions of ice blades. The ground was full of dense marks, and the sharp blades had cut thousands of holes in a radius of more than 100 meters. The chosen of the Maiden of Pain slowly took off her cloak, revealing a wicked face. There was a scar on the side of her face. Her skin was dark and her pupils were blood red. At a glance, one could recognize that she was a drow from the Underdark. As the chosen of the Maiden of Pain, she did not seem to be afraid of this level of attack. She just looked up at the escaping girl and said slowly, "How many more times can you cast such spells? If you continue to stay here, Arendelle will soon become a dead city. I'm curious, do you choose to save your sister? Or do you choose to save the thousands of civilians in Arendelle?" Arendelle. This was the most prosperous kingdom in the Frost Kingdom. Its superior location near the sea attracted countless caravans. The endless stream of ships did not stop even because of the cold winter. In the distance at sea level, a girl in a white tulle slowly walked out. The sea she stepped on was frozen into ice. Her long silver hair fluttered in the wind, and the places she walked were shrouded in the cold wind and snow. The ice spread at an amazing speed. The whole sea near the port of Arendelle was frozen. One by one, the busy dock workers froze in place. Then they were covered by ice and frozen into ice sculptures. The girl stared blankly ahead. When she stepped on the dock, she looked up at the top of Arendelle's castle. At the top of the castle, a woman who looked almost identical to Princess Anna but with the same silver hair stood in the wind and snow. In front of her was a mirror made of ice. In the mirror was a drow with a strange smile. Chapter 143. Glacier City. Soren strolled through this strange northern city. He didn't know if it was because it was close to the river and the sea, but there was often a faint fishy smell in the northern city. Amber City was also a city close to the river, but it was obviously not as bad as Glacier City. Soren could smell the fishy smell in the air as he walked on the street. This was a transit city in the Frost Kingdom. Because of the cold climate, food rotted slowly. Most of the meat in the north came from transported fish and seafood. It was a paradise for seafood gourmets. You could buy crabs the size of a porcelain bowl here for 5 copper dirhams. However, it seemed that humans in this era did not like seafood very much because there was not enough seasoning to remove the fishy smell. Many nutritious seafood fish were eaten by the lower class of civilians. There were many poisonous seafood. Although it was not fatal, it was easy to get sick or even lose your life if you ate too much of it. The staple food of the Frost Kingdom was still more than 10 kinds of fish. Soren even bought a very ferocious king crab the size of a wash basin for 3 silver dirhams. This could be temporarily stored in the multi-dimensional bag, and a section could be cut off and roasted on the fire. Soren replenished a lot of supplies. In addition to his own weapons and equipment, he also needed to replenish some food. It was about 2 or 3 days away from Arendelle, and it was a northern city closer to the sea. Soren's figure was more conspicuous among the northerners. From time to time, some people looked at him with bad intentions, but after seeing the curved sword at his waist, they withdrew their gaze. People from all walks of life were the most sensitive. People with bad eyesight would not live long. Soren did not look like a foreigner who was easy to bully. Bows and crossbows were not often used in the north because of the climate. The cold climate would affect the bowstring, but iron products here were relatively developed. Warriors with shields and short swords equipped with spears and javelins could be seen here. The northerners were quite good at throwing javelins, and some of them could directly break the defense of heavy armored warriors. Soren's weapons also included 60-centimeter long javelins. He had prepared a total of 5 short javelins, which were good for dealing with large beasts, including subspecies of dragons. Wizards had secret spell shops all over the world. The most common spell scrolls here were ice spells from the evocation system. Soren bought the scrolls for featherfall, levitation, flight, and so on. In total, he spent about 1,600 Kindler's coins, which was more than half of the gems he sold. Flight wasn't something that could be mastered directly. Learning the prerequisite spells could increase the efficiency of learning flight. Soren didn't stay in the city for too long. After completing the necessary supplies, he headed towards the wilderness. He had accumulated quite a lot of slaughter EXP, and if he killed 3 to 5 more bugbears he would be able to level up again. The profession level of a rogue increased in a straight line from level 9. After level 14, it would reach more than 100,000 slaughter EXP. A purebred profession without a part-time profession would also need more than 2 million slaughter EXP to reach the level of a legendary profession. So Soren's priority now was to level up as a wizard and maximize the use of slaughter EXP as much as possible. The wizard profession level increased in a straight line after level 9. Not counting the slaughter EXP needed for part-time professions, it could reach tens of thousands. Wizards above level 14 needed more than 200,000 slaughter EXP to level up. So the number of high-grade wizards had been very rare until now. Unless it was someone with amazing talent, it would take dozens of years for others to enter the field of high-grade wizards. In the past, Soren started to try to slay dragons after he reached level 15. Of course, it wasn't the kind of purebred dragons, but the subspecies of dragons such as ground dragons, pterosaurs, wyverns, and so on. He killed the first purebred dragon when he was level 16 as a rogue, but it was just a white dragon that had just reached adulthood. Before Tier 3, slaughter EXP would be an explosive period. The leveling speed of a player's class would be relatively fast. If he wanted to increase his strength later on, he could no longer just deal with random trash. A pterosaur gave more slaughter EXP than killing a large group of goblins, and the value of the loot was also several times more. Advancing to legendary not only required slaughter EXP, but also more than 100,000 kindlers worth of wealth. This world couldn't be separated from money. Soren still didn't have the financial ability to carry out the bloodline purification ceremony for himself, let alone replenish his rare high-grade equipment. The value of a legendary wizard was basically more than 1 million kindlers worth, which was equivalent to the wealth of a city. It was only enough for him to complete half of a wizard tower. Rogue was a poor profession and the need for money was not too serious. Although the gap was still big, Soren had already begun to plan to enter the realm of legends. He still needed a lot of things and the most important thing at present was money. A set of rare grade equipment had not been collected yet. The huge cost of learning spells had to be accumulated, and the huge amount of alchemy expenses was still nowhere to be seen. Wizards were a profession that was always short of money, and there was never enough money to spend. Money was power to wizards. Low-grade wizards were able to defeat high-grade professions because of money. For now. Few wizards could challenge high-grade professions. The main reason was not the gap in strength, but because they did not have as much money as the other party. Sometimes Soren really felt that he should hug the thigh of the goddess of wealth. After a simple day's rest, Soren left Glacier City and walked toward the desolate wilderness. He knew a place in the Frost Kingdom where the pterosaur subspecies gathered. They were a hybrid of the white dragon and were distributed in groups of 3 to 5. They could spit out ice breath, and the challenge difficulty belonged to the sea level among the pterosaur subspecies. They were relatively easy to deal with. As long as he killed a nest of them, it would be enough for him to exchange for a high-grade rare-grade equipment. The wilderness of the Frost Kingdom was relatively quiet. The distribution of wild creatures was actually very scattered. Species were divided into territories by groups. Adventurers rarely farmed monsters one by one, and the monsters appeared in groups. It was possible that after trekking for an entire day, you would only encounter a few scattered monsters and kill them all. There wouldn't be any more in the near future. The situation in Whiterun was mainly because of a special event that led to the large-scale gathering of monsters. Otherwise, the food shortage would make them kill each other until the number was right. In Soren's memory, farming monsters actually referred to killing people. The most abundant thing in the world was not monsters, but intelligent creatures everywhere. These were the source of experience that could never be killed. Therefore, for a long time, the people of the evil faction were generally 1 or 2 levels higher than the people of the good faction. Unfortunately, these people did not end well. This was a taboo. Because those ordinary intelligent creatures were also the source of the faith of the gods. In this place where faith was widespread, they were the cornerstone of faith, and they were also the ones who supported the shrines all over the world. If you encountered some taboo, it would be the shrines that would attack you, and there was the possibility of a legendary being. The only place Soren had farmed people was the desert. The group of desert bandits was not loved by anyone. Not only were they numerous, but they were also densely distributed. Killing too many of them would at most provoke a demigod church. Other than that, there were basically no serious consequences. It seemed that he had completely adapted to the cold. Soren was now very resistant to cold weather, and it was not inconvenient for him to move around in the Frost Kingdom. At noon, he found a relatively dry place to set up a campfire, then cut a section of the king crab and roasted it. This kind of delicious food was only available in a few areas, and the price was quite cheap. Spices were extremely expensive. The weight of spices was almost equivalent to the weight of gold. Even with the income of an adventurer, they could not afford it. Soren rarely used these spices in the past, and now he only brought a little. Otherwise, he would always feel like he was eating gold. If he ate as much as he wanted, he could eat the money to buy a rare grade equipment. It was easy to ensure survival in this world, but the cost of enjoyment was dozens of times higher. The sea salt was slightly bitter. The superior refined salt had to be filtered through alchemy, and the price was slightly more expensive. Soren was not that particular about it, so he just sprinkled some salt and spices and ate it like that. The king crab tasted good. Soren did not quite understand why people in this era were a little taboo to eat crabs. When he was about 50% full, he suddenly heard something. He suddenly stood up and held his curved sword in his hand. Soren pushed aside the snow-covered bushes and carefully approached the place where the sound came from. It was not far from his position, about 100 meters away. He heard something like a plop. There was nothing in front of him. However, there seemed to be a slight dent in the snow. Soren's expression was a little strange. He took a step forward vigilantly, and then carefully reached out his finger to touch it. He touched soft skin even though his eyes could not see anything. Greater invisibility? Soren withdrew his finger in surprise, and then carefully touched the nose. The nose was a little small and exquisite, and it looked like a woman. Her breathing was weak, and it seemed that she had fainted. Soren still could not see anything. The effect of greater invisibility was too strong, far stronger than ordinary invisibility. Soren could only rely on touch to determine the target. He touched soft long hair and a delicate earring. He touched along the neck and felt 2 soft and full mounds in front of the chest. The texture was quite good, and it was very elastic when pinched. It should be a young girl. The clothes she was wearing were very exquisite, and it seemed to be made of high-quality silk. She must be of high status. There were no traces of blood on her body, and her heartbeat was quite stable. She probably did not suffer any fatal injuries. Soren hesitated for a moment. He then bent down and picked up the girl who he could not see, but felt that she was a human girl. He then turned around and walked towards the bonfire. Greater invisibility did not last long, and he did not have a spell to break it. He could only wait for it to wear off. He hoped that saving this girl would not bring him any trouble. Soren would not have done this in the past, but he had just been saved once, and it could be considered as doing a good deed. The girl in his arms was very light, and it seemed that she was enchanted with other spells. How could a girl who had fainted with greater invisibility suddenly appear in this desolate wilderness? It felt like she would bring him trouble. Chapter 144. Next to the bonfire. Soren put the girl next to the bonfire. Because she couldn't be seen with the naked eye, he could only put her a little further away to avoid being burned. Invisibility was only a second circle spell, but greater invisibility was a fourth circle spell. The difference between the two spells was huge. Unless Soren took off her clothes, there was no way to see her, and only her clothes could be seen. This was one of the most common spells for wizards. Wizards above grade 3 had replaced the second circle invisibility spell with greater invisibility. This spell wouldn't reveal itself even if it was used to attack. It would only show a blurry outline. It was a very abnormal spell. Soren didn't have the ability to see through invisibility, nor did he have a spell to break it. He could only sit next to her and continue eating. About half an hour later, the girl next to him still showed no signs of waking up. He seemed a little impatient. He reached out and pinched her nose, then pressed heavily on her chest twice. There was still no reaction at all. Soren raised his hand and slapped her face. He didn't use much strength, but it still didn't wake her up. He didn't know if she was unconscious because of supernatural factors. Anyway, Soren searched her body and didn't find any wounds. Now there were two problems in front of him. The first was that the girl hadn't woken up. Should Soren leave her here or take her on the road? If he left her here, it was equivalent to giving up halfway. It was better not to save her in the first place. Soren wasn't a person who liked to give up halfway. But he couldn't wait for her to wake up here either. The girl couldn't see, but he knew that her identity was strange. She had several spells on her body and was unconscious in the wild. The trouble ahead was probably not small. It was easy to encounter danger if he stayed here. Soren hesitated a little and began to act. As a rogue, he was good at surviving in the wild. He began to erase all the traces left by the two, including the place where she first appeared. This was one of the advantages of the Frost Kingdom. It was much more difficult to track than in the south. As long as he erased the traces left behind, even if someone wanted to track him, they couldn't do anything. It took him a while to clean up the traces, and then he completely extinguished the bonfire. Then Soren picked up the invisible girl and walked toward the snow-covered mountains that stretched for hundreds of miles. The stronger the monster, the more dangerous the place it lived. Dragons would not come to the plains for no reason. They lived in cliffs and high mountains. Anyway, they were creatures that could fly. It's impossible to deal with these creatures without entering the mountains. Their hunting range rarely spreads to very open areas. It was difficult to walk on the snow-covered road. Soren couldn't walk fast with a woman in his arms, and he had to erase the footprints he left behind. Snowflakes fell from the sky, and before long, everything was covered. Soren reached out his hand to feel the man's breathing. His breathing was still stable. Either he had a good physique or he had some special equipment. However, the right side of her face was slightly swollen. He didn't know if it was because of his initial slap. Anyway, he didn't use much strength and it swelled so easily. The girl in his hand looked very pampered and spoiled. Her ability to withstand blows was really too weak. He walked for half a day. Soren didn't know how far he walked, but he entered the snow-covered mountains. The sky was getting dark and he found a place to set up camp. The wind in the mountains was very strong, and he could hear the wind whistling behind a rock. Soren took out some things to set up camp. He placed the unconscious girl in a corner. He didn't know what kind of spell she had cast on herself, but it lasted for such a long time. He even wanted to take off all her clothes to take a look. Soren set up a bonfire and drank some water. Then he took out some water and drank a few mouthfuls. Remembering that the lady beside him had not drunk any water for the entire day, he reached out and touched her head. Then, he pried open her mouth and carefully poured some water in. He pressed on her chest a few times and it seemed that she had swallowed it. Cough cough. A weak cough suddenly sounded and then there was a blur of colors. The girl who had been invisible for almost a day finally showed her original appearance. She didn't look very old, about 15 or 16 years old. She was wearing a very delicate long dress, and there were a lot of exquisite embroidery on it. She looked very pretty. Her long eyelashes were very beautiful, and her skin was very white and delicate. It was obvious that she was a pampered girl. The only thing that stood out was the red mark on the right side of her face. It was a clear handprint, and her cheek was slightly swollen. Soren was a little embarrassed when he saw this. He really didn't use much strength and it looked like he only gave her a light slap. The girl slowly opened her eyes. When she saw that there was someone in front of her, she shrank back. Her eyes were filled with fear. When she noticed that Soren was approaching, she didn't hesitate to pounce on him and bite his arm. She didn't look like a petite girl, but she was actually stronger than Soren. She pushed him to the ground and bit his arm. The girl used a lot of strength and Soren frowned in pain. He wanted to knock her out, but she looked very pale. He didn't know when she would wake up, so he reached out and pinched her nose. Oh, oh, oh! The girl couldn't breathe through her nose, so her mouth loosened a little. Soren instantly reached out and pulled her chin out. Originally, he had planned to dislocate her chin, but considering that she might have just woken up, he decided to go easy on her. She looked like a girl with no combat experience. Who would bite someone's arm to protect themselves? If you want to bite someone, you should bite their throat. What's the point of biting someone's arm? Were you born in the year of the dog? The girl was instantly knocked away by Soren's grip. She was about to pounce on him again like an angry cat, but she suddenly saw something. She glanced at Soren's scimitar and said in disbelief, "It's you. It's actually you. Did you save me? Do you still remember me? You were unconscious in the snow that day. I was the one who brought you back to the city." The girl's words were a little incoherent, and her expression and gestures were a little comical. However, Soren still understood what she meant. He was a little surprised and said, "You were the one who brought me back to the city that day? How can there be such a coincidence?" The girl seemed to want to stand up, but she frowned and sat back down. The sudden relaxation made her feel a little weak and she said in a weak voice, "I saw you unconscious in the snow that day, so I sent someone to bring you to the city for treatment. I was going to bring you with me, but Grandma Glina didn't agree." "Grandma Glina? She's dead. Carlo. Hint. They're all dead." When the girl said this, her voice was filled with sadness. Tears flowed down from her beautiful big eyes, and her shoulders trembled slightly. She couldn't help but sob. Soren frowned slightly. He could tell from the girl's words that there was a lot of trouble, but he still carefully walked over and patted her back. Oh. This consolation seemed to be even worse. The girl threw herself into his arms and cried with tears and snot running down her face. She looked like a pitiful little kitten. Those who said that girls looked good when they cried were definitely crazy. Would you believe it if they said that they would throw tears and snot all over your chest? She cried for a long time before she gradually stopped. Her eyes were red and swollen and she looked a little pitiful. Soren's chest was wet. She was choking with sobs and her snot was almost coming out. There was no beauty in this scene and it only made people feel pity for her. Sympathy for the weak was within the scope of morality. Soren obviously had his own moral standards. "I'm sorry." The girl looked at the bloodstains on Soren's arm, and her voice was choked with sobs. That was the result of her bite. She used a lot of strength when she bit him. If it wasn't for Soren's quick reaction, she could have bitten off a piece of flesh from Soren's body. The girl wiped her face and wiped away the tears on her face. She seemed to feel that her right cheek was a little red and swollen, but she didn't say anything. She just sat on the ground in low spirits. It was obvious that she was a girl who lived like a princess. She probably hadn't even seen blood before and she couldn't take it anymore. "All right." Soren didn't know what to say. He patted her shoulder and said, "I'll prepare something for you to eat first. You're probably starving. Let me know after you eat. Since you saved me before, I'll do my best to help you this time." The girl raised her head. Her eyes were red, but there was a glimmer of hope in them. She choked with sobs and said, Thank you." Soren seemed to be a little silent. Just by intuition he knew that things weren't simple. It would be troublesome to get involved in such a thing. He took out the ingredients and roasted them on the fire. Then he glanced at the girl next to him. Every detail of the girl told him that the girl's identity was quite noble. The enemy who dared to attack her was definitely not simple. He was not a compassionate person, but if the other party had saved him and he left her here, he would not do such a thing. He was a man of principle and sometimes even stubborn. Soren cut off a section of the king crab and asked, "How did you recognize me? My appearance at that time was quite different from now, right?" The girl was still sobbing softly. She started crying so hard that she couldn't stop for a while. She raised her head and whispered, Your sword?" Soren's sword was very different from the rest. In the Frost Kingdom, this kind of scimitar made of elven scales was very rare, and the beauty of the scimitar itself was also very impressive. Chapter 145. The sky was getting dark. The girl seemed to be really hungry. She ate even more than Soren. She probably hadn't eaten all day. She was a bit ravenous. Soren had been grilling meat silently. When the girl was full, he slowly said, "What's your name? Who are you?" Anna. The girl hesitated and whispered, "I'm a noble of Arendelle." Soren turned to look at her and said slowly, "Ordinary nobles can't afford to wear clothes like yours. You should be a member of the royal family of Arendelle, right? Arendelle is a special kingdom. There are almost no great nobles in it. There are only 2 members of the royal family. One is the Princess Royal, who is about to ascend the throne, and the other is her sister. It is said that the Princess Royal of Arendelle is a very powerful destiny sorcerer. You should be her sister, right? Princess Royal can't be forced into such a difficult situation." The girl named Anna could not help but stare at Soren with some surprise and murmured, "I knew you must be a very powerful adventurer. They also said you were a fool. How could you get yourself into such a difficult situation? You almost died in the wild." "Well, I'm the little princess of Arendelle. But I'm not as powerful as my sister. I'm just an ordinary person." Soren didn't continue the previous sentence. He didn't want to talk about the asceticism. He just looked at the girl in front of him and said slowly, "Arendelle is one of the best kingdoms in the Frost Kingdom. The Princess Royal is one of the few legendary sorcerers here. The enemy who dares to attack you is definitely not simple. According to the standards of the royal family of this world, your bodyguards are at least grade 3. If you take into account the wealth and treasures of the royal family, there should be a legendary profession among the people who attacked you." Anna couldn't help but open her mouth wide and murmured, "So powerful." Soren stared at the man's expression, and his face became more and more unsightly. He said in a low voice, "The local legendary professions can't attack you, because that would lead to a devastating disaster. I've heard of that elder sister of yours. When she gets angry, she can destroy an entire city with her bare hands. Then the one who attacked you must be an outsider. Moreover, they are people with evil intentions." He paused for a moment and said slowly, "There's only one thing I want to know now, and that is, were there any drows among the people who attacked you?" The girl's face was filled with disbelief as she murmured, "How did you know that I met a drow?" Sure enough, he was still involved in this matter. Soren silently fiddled with the bonfire. His expression was a little uncertain. He said in a deep voice, "That's the chosen of the goddess of torture. I've seen traces of their activities when I came here. They're probably the only ones who would dare to attack the second princess of Arendelle. Others are simply looking for death. The Princess Royal can freeze thousands of miles in a fit of anger." Anna hesitated for a moment, then stared at Soren and said, "Elder sister is a very good person, very gentle and kind. She never abuses her ability, let alone does what you said. She won't hurt those innocent people." Soren did not answer. He looked at the snow outside and said slowly, "What are you going to do now?" Anna hesitated for a moment, then looked up at Soren and whispered, "Can you send me back to Arendelle? I'll definitely repay you well. Elder sister will also give you the reward you deserve and even give you a title." "A title?" Soren smiled and shook his head. "No. At least not now. Since those believers of torture dared to attack you, they will never let me take you back easily. I don't even have a chance to fight against the chosen of the gods. They are more terrible than legendary wizards. Besides, if I'm not wrong, all the roads leading to Arendelle should have their eyes now. As soon as you show up, you will be attacked immediately. Unless your elder sister comes to pick you up in person." Anna looked a little depressed and murmured, "I don't know what happened to elder sister. That bad drow said that if elder sister saved me, she couldn't save Arendelle. Big sister used ice to trap her and then I escaped. I don't know what happened to Arendelle now. I hope everyone is okay." "What a kind little girl." Soren looked up at her and said slowly, "It's not that I can't send you back at all, but not now and not by the normal way." The girl showed a glimmer of hope when she heard this and looked up into his eyes. The other party's eyes were very pure. She looked like a girl who had not experienced much of the world. Soren looked away slightly and said, "Now should be the time when they are most anxious. The fallen are probably desperately looking for you. So we'd better not leave here in the near future. When they take the initiative to expose themselves, your elder sister will deal with them. Then I'll find a way to take you over these mountains, and then go back to Arendelle from the sea." The girl obviously believed him and nodded her little head gently. Soren stirred the campfire to make it a little stronger and then said, "You should rest well first. I guess you're tired too. We're going into the mountains tomorrow and we may encounter some trouble." The girl looked at him doubtfully and whispered, "Going into the mountains? Aren't we going to wait here?" "No." Soren shook his head and said, "I'm going in to do something." The girl was obviously very curious. She blinked and said, "What are you going to do? There's no place for people to live in." Soren glanced at her and said lightly, "To slay a dragon." The girl's eyes flickered and she said in surprise, "Slay a dragon? There are no dragons in the Frost Kingdom, right? They're all afraid of my elder sister. It said that they all fled to Iceland." Soren was startled. It seemed that the legendary Princess Royal was more powerful than he thought. No wonder there were no dragons in the Frost Kingdom. Were they really scared away by the Princess Royal? How strong was this legendary destiny sorceress? Ice Quetzalcoatlus. Soren filled the firewood and said, "I'm going to kill some of them to improve my strength and then get some money." "Money?" The girl hurriedly searched her body and then said with a sad face, "I lost my bag. There are a lot of valuable things in it." She looked at her body, took off her rings and earrings with some heartache and said carefully, "I'll give these to you first. They were left to me by my mother. Can I redeem them with money when I go back?" Her voice was a little nervous and her little face was a little funny. Soren turned his head and looked at her. He couldn't help but smile but did not reach out to take those things. Instead he said slowly, "Take them with you. Since you've saved me I should repay you. Maybe your fate really shouldn't be like this." He had heard of the Princess Royal of Arendelle, but he had never heard of the second princess. He didn't know what her fate would have been if she hadn't met him. The ice storm broke out. The berserk Princess Royal froze thousands of miles and turned the earth into an ice hell. Was it because of her? It seemed possible. There were only 2 princesses in the royal family of Arendelle, and she might be the Princess Royal's only relative. Thank you." The girl silently took back her rings and earrings and looked up at Soren in front of her. A grateful smile appeared on her mouth and she said slowly, "You're a good person." Soren's fingers trembled. Then he helplessly turned his head to look at her and said seriously, "I'm not a good person. I've killed more people than you know. I only helped you because you saved me. Please don't say that to me again. It's not very auspicious in my hometown." "Okay. You should rest. There's still a long way to go tomorrow." The girl didn't seem to understand why a word of gratitude would make Soren have such a big reaction, but she still sat down obediently and whispered, "Bullshit. You're scaring me. You don't look like a bad guy who has killed a lot of people." Soren's appearance was delicate, and he looked a little like a half-elf. The girl obviously didn't believe that Soren's hands were full of blood. She just thought that he didn't seem to like hearing this sentence. It was kind of like the people in the stories who stood up for justice in the dark. Otherwise he wouldn't have saved her, right? Did he really kill a lot of people? The girl was obviously very tired. She soon felt sleepy and fell asleep on a rock with her head tilted. Time passed little by little. Soren took out a magic scroll and began to analyze it. The cold wind was howling outside. Occasionally he would stop to listen and then continue his research. Midnight. The sleeping girl's face was a little frightened. She was murmuring something unconsciously. Then she suddenly woke up and shouted with her eyes wide open, "No. No. Don't kill her." Soren put down the scroll and looked at her with a frown. "Nightmares?" The girl was stunned for a moment. Then she seemed to wake up. She gently nodded and carefully said, "Can I sit next to you?" Soren nodded. She slowly walked over and carefully sat next to Soren. She still seemed a little scared. Soren reached out and touched her hair. Then he patted her back. The girl seemed to be relieved. She looked at the scroll in Soren's hand and then leaned her head on Soren's shoulder. Time passed quickly. Unknowingly, she grabbed the corner of Soren's clothes with her fingers. Her little head was also tilted to his knee. Her breathing gradually became even. Apparently, she had fallen asleep. Maybe she was really tired. It would be hard for a princess who lived like a princess to experience so many things in one day. Soren opened the magic scroll again and occasionally looked down at her. After coming to this world, it was the first time that someone fell asleep on his knee except for little Vivian. The cold wind was still howling outside. He felt the storm brewing in the Frost Kingdom. Chapter 146. On the side of the road to Arendelle. An iceberg had appeared out of thin air. The iceberg was about 30 meters high, and the blue ice seemed to have other powers. The nearby vegetation had been frozen, and frozen statues could be vaguely seen. Among them was a masked man in a black tights. At this moment there was no breath of life. Basically no one else dared to approach. Even an idiot would know that something dangerous must have happened with such a strange and sudden iceberg. This iceberg had existed for a long time. A trace of cold air spread around, causing the surrounding temperature to plummet. All of a sudden, a crack appeared on the iceberg. The crack spread at an alarming speed, and then covered the whole iceberg. Finally, in a loud rumbling sound, the whole iceberg began to collapse and shatter. The frozen statues also cracked at once, revealing the dark red fault after the frozen flesh and blood. Countless pieces of broken ice fell down, smashing a pit in the ground, but there seemed to be something in the center. The falling ice was bounced away, revealing an oval transparent energy shield. Damn it! The drow came out with a pale and stiff face. She must have been trapped inside for a long time to make the naturally dark-skinned drow pale. Her fingers were trembling slightly, and a faint white frost was melting rapidly. The wizard robe on her body was soaked, revealing her curvaceous and exquisite body, as well as the striking whip mark on her back, which could be seen through the soaked clothes. She silently snapped her fingers, and all the moisture on her body disappeared, and her appearance changed back to her original appearance. The drow glanced coldly at the frozen and shattered body next to her with blood-red pupils, then frowned and said, "A bunch of useless males." After that, her figure flew up out of thin air. The drow looked at the broken ice in front of her. After the broken ice, the ice melted rapidly. This was ice produced by supernatural forces, not natural ice. She looked up in the direction of the sea where Arundel was. She frowned and murmured, "How can the ice and snow incarnation of a destiny warlock trap me? This ice has even sealed the dimensional space. This is not a power that mortals can have." "Arendel's Princess Royal. Winter Maiden, what are you hiding from me?" She stretched out her finger and opened a spatial door. Then she stepped into it. The ice on the ground was getting thinner and thinner, gradually revealing the frozen bloodstains and the broken limbs of the frozen statues. The faint smell of blood spread in all directions. On Arendel's castle, the elder princess, who looked almost identical to Princess Anna, turned her head. There was an iceberg in the ice mirror in front of her. As she took a step forward, her figure disappeared into thin air. Her remaining silhouette dissipated with the cold wind, and one could vaguely see sparkling snowflakes dancing in the air before falling to the ground. The next moment, her figure appeared directly on the shore. The dancing wind and snow gathered in the air, turning into the beautiful and cold face of Princess Royal. Winter Maiden. Princess Royal looked at the frozen human-shaped statues on the pier, and there was a trace of anger in her blue pupils. Just this moment of delay, thousands of people nearby were frozen. Traces of ice were spreading towards Arundel, and there were cries of horror from civilians all around. For this godlike power, these mortals had no ability to resist. As long as they were touched by the spreading ice, they would soon turn into ice sculptures. The expression on Princess Royal's face was fierce, like a queen. She waved her hand angrily, and the frozen sea was lifted up with ice spikes hundreds of feet high, directly forcing the figure of Winter Maiden to retreat hundreds of meters. The frozen sea around her cracked rapidly, and the frozen fish could be seen faintly. This sea was not only frozen on the surface, but even the sea below was completely frozen. A fierce momentum spread, and the ice and snow suddenly became violent. As the most praised female heir in the history of Arundel, Princess Royal and Anna were two extremes. It was difficult to describe her temperament in words. If there was anything, it should be the legendary aura of a king. This was an existence that would make you feel like a queen at first glance, an existence that would make you feel reverence and awe. In Arundel, some people even worshipped her as a god. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" The light of spells emerged, and the court wizards of Arundel finally arrived. Many of them were women, and a blue light broke through the air. It was a legendary profession. Arundel was a wonderful country. The women here were far more talented than the men. Nearly half of the spellcasters in the court were women. Here, women could also be the lords of the city and have the same status as men, but they did not discriminate against men like the drows. Legend has it that they were the descendants of the goddess of ice, an ancient god who had left her bloodline here. In the history of Arundel, the members of the royal family who were titled as queens were similar to men. Nearly half of Arundel's history was ruled and managed by queens. Princess Royal turned and glanced at them, then said, "Stand down." The existence in front of them was not something that mortals could fight against. Even legendary professions had no ability to fight against her. Because she was the Winter Maiden, one of the gods who had existed in the world for a long time. Although she had been limited to the power of a weak divine power, she was still much stronger than most legendary professions. Your Majesty. The court wizards around hesitated for a moment, but they obediently retreated to the back, including one of the legendary professions. It seemed that the Princess Royal had a very high prestige in Arendelle. After the court wizards retreated, they immediately began to work together to cast a protective barrier against the gradually spreading ice. In the Frost Kingdom, evocation spells were very popular, and evocation ice witches were often seen here. At last the Winter Maiden spoke. Her voice seemed very ethereal, as if it did not exist in this world at all. She looked at Princess Royal blankly and said slowly, "I have come to take back what belongs to me. A mortal does not deserve to have such power." Princess Royal could not help but frown. She could not understand the other party's words. But she still said seriously, "Gods should not come to the mortal world at will, let alone hurt innocent civilians. Winter Maiden, please take back your avatar or you will be punished." A strange smile appeared on the Winter Maiden's face and she said slowly, "Do you really think this is just my avatar?" Her figure disappeared on the spot. A biting cold wind blew, and the figure of Frost Maiden dissipated with the wind. The next moment she appeared directly behind Princess Royal. Her fingers turned into a cold light, instantly stabbing towards Princess Royal's heart. Blood splattered. The white palm was like a sharp blade, directly piercing through Princess Royal's heart. The palm covered in blood held a beating heart, and then clenched tightly. Bang! A cruel smile appeared on the Winter Maiden's face and she said slowly, "Sure enough, you are just a humble mortal. You are not qualified to have such power." There was a cry of exclamation all around. "Princess Royal! Your Majesty!" Several figures flew out in succession, and a blue light flashed across the sky. Some kind of strange creature that did not look like a human and was wrapped in ice could be vaguely seen. The heart turned into powder in the palm of the Winter Maiden, but the original blood suddenly turned into crystal snowflakes. Princess Royal's stiff body disappeared with the wind and turned into ice and snow dancing in the sky. The drops of blood that fell all melted. The smile on the Winter Maiden's face stiffened, and she looked at the sea under her feet for a moment. Another Princess Royal appeared on the sea. There was a flash of light in her blue eyes, and her silver-white long hair fluttered in the wind. The dress on her body turned into crystal blue in an instant, and the surrounding space seemed to be distorted. A phantom light covered by ice and snow could be vaguely seen behind her. Princess Royal lifted her toes and stomped on the frozen sea. In the blink of an eye, a crystal snowflake outline appeared on the sea, covering a range of hundreds of meters. 6 pillars of ice rose up, and countless ice crystals spread out, causing the entire sea surface to shake violently. The crystal ice spread at an amazing speed, and the flying ice and snow formed a wall on the sea. 4 snowflake emblems appeared around the wall, and then an ice fortress with a diameter of hundreds of meters was formed in an instant, like a prison shrouding the figure of the Winter Maiden. The figure of Princess Royal appeared in front of the frozen fortress. Her expression was very dignified, frowning and looking at the Winter Maiden in it. She could feel a huge force brewing. The other party did not suffer any harm, but was temporarily trapped in it. The ice on the surface of the sea gradually cracked. The ice fortress formed in the blink of an eye stood on the frozen sea. Princess Royal raised her hand and opened a dark space door. The light of countless stars could be vaguely seen inside as well as flying and flashing materials. She frowned and took a deep breath. Then she stretched out her slender fingers and slowly raised them. There was a loud sound as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. The entire sea level was collapsing rapidly. This ice fortress that covered an area of over 100 meters gradually rose up. A huge gap could be seen in the frozen sea. Immediately, the entire ice fortress was sent into a different dimensional space, and the frozen sea was already cracked. Princess Royal's face was slightly pale. She looked up at the sky. The dark dimensional space had disappeared, and a blue ice fortress could be faintly seen flying in the void. With the movement of those strange materials, it turned into a tiny dot in an instant. She waved her hand gently, and the frozen sea gradually melted. The ice that spread for dozens of miles quickly dissipated. Chapter 147. The howling cold wind shrouded the valley. The girl was stronger than Soren had imagined. She had already woken up at dawn and noticed that she was sleeping on Soren's lap. She blushed a little, but there was nothing pretentious about it. She just stood up silently and began to tear off the debris on her body. This included the lace edges of the exquisite long dress and some ribbons that restricted movement. Her hair was tied into a single ponytail and then simply coiled up. She tied the bottom of her trousers with a ribbon. Soon she looked much more capable and experienced. This move made Soren show a trace of appreciation in his eyes. He nodded silently and handed her a long sword. Nobles had to learn 6 arts, including writing, painting, poetry, dancing, etiquette, riding, and swordsmanship. The girl in front of him, as the Princess of Arendelle, must have learned these 6 arts. She should have some swordsmanship skills, but she had no actual combat ability. Gloria rarely fought, but when it came to a life-and-death battle she could also use a good swordsmanship. The girl in front of him was the same, but she was too spoiled before. Never underestimate the women of this world. Male chauvinism could still be played around in his previous life. Here, if you were a male chauvinist, the northern witches would hang you up and beat you up. After the northern witches finished beating the drows, the Amazon warriors would continue to beat you up. When the Amazon warriors were almost done, the Siren Nagas would continue to beat you up. It was absolutely guaranteed that you would no longer have any male chauvinist thoughts. Note, there are countless males who have been slapped in the face in the Underdark. Women also had a dominant position in this world. This situation could be seen from 2 things. The first was the number of queens in the world. They firmly held about 1/3 of the positions of the supreme rulers. The second was the goddesses who were close to the great divine power. In this world, more than 60% of the gods who were close to the great divine power were female gods, and they were stronger than a considerable number of the male gods. As for their names, he could name them with his eyes closed. Mother Earth, Goddess of Agriculture, Lady of Silver Moon, Lady of Night, Goddess of Magic, Fire Queen, Elemental Goddess, Goddess of Joy, Goddess of Love, Goddess of Wealth, Goddess of Luck, Queen of Spiders. If someone had read the list of gods of the pantheon in the ancient literature, they would no longer have the idea of male chauvinism. Females were stronger than you could imagine. Their soul imprint was classified as a feline, dangerous creature. Especially after mastering extraordinary powers, they could avoid the monthly bleeding buff. You might not be stronger than them even if they were bleeding every month. Now that they could even rely on their power to avoid the bleeding buff, it would be even harder to compete with them. Especially in the domain of life, reproduction, and nurturing, female deities almost occupied the absolute dominant position. It just so happened that this was also the core strength of the race's reproduction. The highest deity of the halflings was a female guardian deity, while the highest deity of the drows was the Queen of Spiders. If it wasn't for the fall of the ancient goddess of life, the current elven main god would still be in some unknown corner. At least 75% of the elven god system was controlled by female gods, and even now the elven main god was sometimes male and sometimes female. Women. Do you know why the older a woman is, the stronger she is than a man? Because they don't have the monthly bleeding buff. Soren had once courted death in the Underdark, and he was slapped in the face by the female drows until he was speechless. There was once a popular saying in the taverns, male chauvinists should definitely go to the Underdark. It's their heaven, but it's also their hell. When you see those males who were kept as slaves by the female elves, your expression will definitely be very interesting. Soren had completely learned his lesson in the Underdark. In the past he basically didn't kill many women. Now, if you asked him to kill a female enemy he would definitely not blink an eye. The road in the valley was very rugged. Soren was walking quite well, but the girl behind him was having a bit of trouble. She didn't know when her foot slipped and her knee was cut open. She was in so much pain that her eyes were filled with tears. If Soren hadn't caught her arm in time, she would have rolled down dozens of meters. The girl seemed to have a bit of a stubborn temper. She was obviously in so much pain that she was limping, but she still gritted her teeth and followed behind. Soren finally couldn't stand it anymore. He found a place to stop and bent down to treat her wound. Don't move. Soren took out bandages and ointment. Maybe it was because he was often injured, but among all his basic skills, the one that leveled up the fastest was actually heal. From the beginning to the end, he didn't invest a single skill point, and now his heal skill was close to 40 to 50 points. The girl's skin was very good. It was white and delicate like silk to the touch. But it was precisely because her skin was so good that it could be broken by the slightest touch. Soren took off her shoes and saw a red mark. Princess Anna's skin would have a red mark if she was slightly scratched by a rock. In some places, A little bit of blood would ooze out from the broken capillaries. Her slender and white palms had never done any heavy work. The thickness of the skin on her palms was not even 1/3 of Soren's. What did this mean? It meant that her body's resistance was like a porcelain doll. The slightest touch would cause red marks and bruises to bleed. Humans had to be tempered. Newborn babies were very fragile. Their skin was also very weak. Red marks might appear if they were touched by something furry. Princess Anna was now like a newborn baby. Her skin was too spoiled in the past. Small red marks would appear on her face when the cold wind was like a knife. When Soren rolled up her trousers to bandage her wound, there were already 20 or 30 red marks and bruises on her white calves. Most of them were left by the rocks when she was walking. And this was still under the condition that she was wearing clothes. Soren really wondered what kind of life she had lived in the past. Her body was so well protected that she didn't even have the ability to resist damage. But fortunately her physique was good. The red marks appeared quickly and disappeared quickly. If she didn't exercise at all in the past and her physique was still very weak, these red marks and bruises would probably stay for a long time. As a seasoned adventurer, he naturally wouldn't ask too much of a spoiled princess. But seeing her now, Soren still hesitated. How about I find a safe place for you to stay? I will prepare enough food and supplies for you. You stay there for a few days and then I will come back for you in 2 days. Oh. The girl's body stiffened when she heard this. She immediately reached out and grabbed his finger. Her voice was trembling and her beautiful big eyes were wet. She said pitifully, "Don't leave me. I can still walk." Sauron sighed and slowly said, "All right, I'll give it to you. Take a rest first and then we will continue later." In such a rugged terrain, it was very troublesome for him to carry a person. Some places were too steep and there was no road. He also needed to climb with his bare hands. The girl in front of him had almost no experience in the wilderness. If it wasn't for her good physique, he would have a headache. The two of them did not rest for long. It seemed that Princess Anna was worried that Soren would leave her in this deserted mountain. After a little rest, Princess Anna said that she could walk, although she still walked with a little limp. There were tears in her eyes. She had probably never suffered like this in her life. Inexplicably, she felt a little wronged and uncomfortable. Perhaps because she was distracted for a moment, she lost her balance and fell again. This time, her whole body fell onto the snowy ground, and her hair was covered with mud and snow. She probably felt wronged and uncomfortable in her heart. After falling, she didn't get up. Instead, she directly lay on the snow and cried, leaving a wet mark on the ground. "Are you okay?" Soren came over and reached out to help her up, but he didn't expect the girl to throw his hand away and cry, "Don't worry about me. Just go. I'm so useless. I'll definitely drag you down. Sister." Oh. Anna is so sad. Anna is so scared. Oh. Sure enough, she was just a child. Soren squatted next to the crying girl, shook his head and sighed. Then he put one hand on her neck and the other hand on her legs and picked her up. The girl weighed about 90 pounds, which was a little taller than other girls of her age. This weight was barely within the range of his physical endurance, but it certainly wasn't at the level of physical exhaustion. If he carried her like this, his physical strength would gradually decrease, and it would be inconvenient for him to climb and walk. The girl was picked up by Soren, and then she was in Soren's arms for a while. "Come." Soren put her on his back and said in a deep voice, "Hold my neck, I'll carry you. Hurry up. Unless you want me to leave you here." The girl hesitated for a moment, and then she carefully reached out and hugged his neck. The two of them moved forward like this. In the snowstorm, Soren had no choice but to carry the spoiled princess on his back. His speed suddenly decreased by half. The girl's face was covered in tears, but there was still a faint smile on her face. Her crying and laughing expression was very funny, but she still obediently hugged Soren's neck and shrunk her body on his back. The cold wind in the mountains was very strong. She couldn't help but lean on Soren's back, and her nose was still choking with sobs. She accidentally cried too hard and she couldn't take it back for now. Chapter 148. Anyone who had climbed the mountain knew how difficult it was to walk. Soren walked steadily, but it was a lot more tiring to carry someone on his back. The upper limit of his load was about 300 pounds. As long as the weight exceeded 300 pounds, it began to seriously affect his movement. Although Soren had a strong constitution, his strength was still only 14 points, which was similar to a normal human laborer who often worked hard. About 100 pounds of weight was still within his tolerance range, but the speed of his stamina consumption increased a lot. Basically, he had to take a break after walking for a while to ensure that it would not affect his explosive power in battle. Under normal circumstances, adventurers needed to maintain their stamina above 70%, preferably between 80% and 90%. The probability of encountering unexpected events in the wilderness was not low. Soren had encountered unexpected battles more than once, so he had always maintained his total stamina above 80%. Only when he felt a little tired, he would rest for a while to restore his stamina to more than 90%. They had begun to approach the range of the ice Quetzalcoatlus. The danger of dragon subspecies was not to be trifled with. Soren did not want his stamina to be unable to keep up with the consumption before the battle even started. There was a faint fragrance at the tip of his nose. He couldn't tell if it was the fragrance of flowers or something else, but it smelled very comfortable. It had the unique fresh smell of a young girl. Occasionally, strands of hair would blow on Soren's cheek, making it slightly itchy. Princess Anna's breathing was very even. She seemed to be observing Soren's ears. She didn't know why she wanted to reach out and pinch them because the more she looked, the more she felt that Soren's ears were a little pointy. She even reached out and touched her own ears. He could feel 2 soft lumps on his back twisting from time to time. Maybe she felt embarrassed. Anyway, after walking for a while, the slight friction had already made the girl's cheeks slightly red. It was not the kind of adult lust but more of a girl's shyness. As the Princess of Arendelle, Anna's education was naturally very comprehensive. The current situation really made her a little shy. Sometimes she would feel that the palms of her hands were very hot, making her feel inexplicably hot. The wind and snow on the mountaintop were very heavy. Soren's expression was still relatively calm. He was paying attention to the surrounding environment, especially the traces in the sky. The ice Quetzalcoatlus could fly in such weather, and it could even launch a diving attack on its target. Occasionally he would feel the girl on his back move, and he could vaguely feel a soft touch, but it was not enough to evoke any other thoughts. Not to mention Soren's own self-control and the current environment, just the knowledge of the Underdark had already made him invulnerable to water and fire. Those Drow's matriarchs and eldest daughters were all masters of seduction. How to charm males was even one of the main courses they learned. It was just like how humans had to learn about geography and religion when they went to school. Vaguely, Soren seemed to have heard something in the cold wind. He carefully put down the girl on his back and said in a low voice, "It's about here. Find a safe place to hide and don't come out later." Ice Quetzalcoatlus. It was one of the subspecies of the Quetzalcoatlus. It looked similar to the Quetzalcoatlus of the dinosaur era. It did not have dragon scales on its body like the pure-blood dragons. It only had a layer of dragon skin, so the requirement to break its defense was relatively low. They had strong hind limbs and their forelimbs were on the wing bones of their wings. They would fold their wings when walking on the ground. They were distributed in small groups on the mountaintops of cold areas. Generally, they were composed of 1 male and 2 female Quetzalcoatlus. Occasionally their cubs could be seen. It was difficult for dragons to reproduce. Quetzalcoatlus would only lay eggs about once every 3 years, and their distribution in the world was very loose. Ice Quetzalcoatlus, subspecies, Grade 4, Gregarious. Challenge rating, 14 monster level, 17 spell-like abilities. Highest and lowest attributes, 22 and 10. Total attribute points, 90 to 100. Special abilities, Dragon Bite, Frost Breath, Dragon Wing Strike. Treasure reward, 1, 5 times. Challenge difficulty, C+. Soren found a stone gap on the top of the mountain. He calculated the size and determined that the Quetzalcoatlus could not get in. He whispered to the girl next to him, "Stay here and don't move. Remember not to come out later." Hunting dragons was a very dangerous thing. He would not be able to take care of the girl next to him when he started, so he had to tell her seriously. Princess Anna's little face was a little excited, and she nervously clenched the long sword in her hand. She whispered, "Don't worry. I won't go out and make trouble for you." "Very good." Soren nodded slightly and then began to prepare. It would be suicidal to challenge the Ice Quetzalcoatlus in a one-on-one fight. A single dive from the Ice Quetzalcoatlus could directly kill a Tier 4 professional. These Quetzalcoatlus could weigh about 3 tons, their length was about 7 meters, and their wingspan was about 5 meters wide. Their strong limbs allowed them to flap their wings, and their strength was enough to push an adult mammoth back several meters. If they hit a person's body, it would be useless no matter what armor they wore. Even rare-grade equipment couldn't withstand such a fierce force, which could directly break a person's spine. The strength of the Quetzalcoatlus was between 20 and 22 points, and its real lethality was much higher than other creatures of the same strength. However, dragons also had a disadvantage that was, most of them were not very agile. Some pureblood dragons only had 10 to 15 points of agility, and their size determined that their flexibility would be reduced a lot. The biggest advantage was that they could fly. Soren took out the javelin and reassembled the metal head of the javelin with tools. It was best to use a steel weapon to deal with dragons, and it was better to weigh as much as possible. He fixed the javelin on his back to ensure that it could be pulled out and thrown in an instant, and then began to prepare other tools. It was a trap tool that was a bit like a tripwire. Soren simply fixed it with an iron chain, and then turned it a little in his hand. This thing was a bit like a horse lock, but it was made of metal and longer. There were balance balls at both ends, which could temporarily restrict the flight of the Quetzalcoatlus after it was thrown out. The resistance of dragon-type creatures was very high. Venom had little effect on them, so Soren did not waste the expensive wyvern venom. He only loaded the crossbow and hung it on his waist. Then he glanced at the girl next to him and turned into the snow. Be careful. Princess Anna watched Soren's back as he went away. She opened her mouth to say something, but she swallowed it back again. She shrank a little, clasped her hands in front of her chest, lowered her forehead slightly to her fingertips, and murmured as if she was praying, "Snow goddess, bless him to come back safe and sound." The snow on the top of the mountain slightly affected his vision. During this season, the ice Quetzalcoatlus would not hunt often. They would reduce the frequency of hunting to about twice a week. Soren did not enter stealth because the footprints on the snow were too obvious. The nest of the ice Quetzalcoatlus was also in a very difficult place to get close to. The sound in front of him was getting more and more obvious. Soren turned around a rock, and a steep mountain wall appeared in front of him. It was about 15 meters high, and on top of it was a simple dragon nest made of various shrubs and branches. It looked like a huge bird's nest. In the middle of it was a huge Quetzalcoatlus, and next to it were two smaller Quetzalcoatlus. He also seemed to see a dragon egg, which was undoubtedly a good thing. If there was a dragon egg, the Quetzalcoatlus would not rush over like a swarm of bees, and it would be much easier for Soren to deal with them. The ice Quetzalcoatlus was gray-white, and their eyesight was very good. After laying eggs, they would watch every corner vigilantly. It was not difficult for them to find Soren. Sneaking in a special environment might not be able to hide from them. The hatching ice Quetzalcoatlus was full of aggression. After seeing Soren in front of him, the male ice Quetzalcoatlus roared. The sound sounded like a language, as if warning him to leave immediately. The dragon subspecies did not have much wisdom. After finding that Soren did not move at all, the male ice Quetzalcoatlus immediately spread its wings and flew up, setting off a large gust of wind and snowflakes, directly flying dozens of meters in the air. The attack of the dragon subspecies was very fierce. But the general pattern could still be grasped. The male ice Quetzalcoatlus circled in the sky and swooped down toward Soren. When it opened its bloody mouth full of sharp teeth, it directly spat out a cold frost. This was the first attack of the dragon subspecies. More than half of the dragon subspecies liked to use dragon breath to destroy their enemies. The ice Quetzalcoatlus swooped down very fast. When it was 10 meters close to the ground, it opened its mouth and spat, then flapped its wings fiercely and flew back into the air. This was the critical moment to fight against the Quetzalcoatlus. Although they looked like wild beasts, they were very cunning and dangerous. Adult Quetzalcoatlus rarely landed to fight with the enemy. They would hover in the air and only dive down when they found a chance to attack. The force of this dive was so great that even a close legendary shield warrior would be injured. The Quetzalcoatlus was always looking for a chance to kill the target with a dive. Only when they had no other choice would they fight on the ground. If Soren wanted to deal with them, he had to force them to come down. In order to force them to come down, he had to resist the frost breath. When a strong stench hit his face, he suddenly twisted his body and moved away a little. Then, in an instant, he threw out the chain in his hand. Soren's left arm was frozen into ice at a speed visible to the naked eye. Half of his body was covered with frost, but the chain in his hand was also thrown out quickly. After hitting the Quetzalcoatlus's narrow neck, it wrapped around the claws of the Quetzalcoatlus's left wing. This was not the kind of chain that tied the Quetzalcoatlus up. It was just wrapped around the Quetzalcoatlus's wing bone. The ice Quetzalcoatlus was not injured, but its flight path had completely changed. It could not fly at all even if it desperately flapped its wings. It almost flopped down from a height of more than 10 meters, and then hit the cold rock on the ground with a bang. At this time it was really injured. The injury was more serious than when Soren cut it. Chapter 149. Ice and snow splashed everywhere. Soren shook his arm to shake off the ice on his body. He then pulled out his javelin and threw it at the ice Quetzalcoatlus in front of him. The ice breath cost him more than 20 frostbite. If it weren't for his minor cold resistance ability, he would have been stiff for a long time before he could regain his consciousness. The most important thing to deal with the ice Quetzalcoatlus was not to cause damage, but to stop it from flying. Although Soren had the opportunity to attack the dragon's head and neck, he still threw the javelin at the ice Quetzalcoatlus's wings. Bang! The heavy javelin penetrated the ice Quetzalcoatlus's wings, got stuck between the bones and nailed to the ground. When the ice Quetzalcoatlus screamed in pain, Soren quickly pulled out his sword and rushed over. Attacking the skull of a dragon couldn't be done directly. Its skull was very hard and even rare-grade weapons couldn't cut through it. It also couldn't attack the seemingly vital parts. The vitality of the dragon species was very tenacious. Even if it was cut until it was covered in blood, it wouldn't die in a short time. It was also impossible to attack the vital organs of the dragon species. To cause such damage, one must prepare a special dragon-slaying weapon. It was like giving you a sword, but you couldn't be sure that you could pierce through an elephant's skin and hit the elephant's heart. The ice Quetzalcoatlus was not small. A human's heart could be pierced with a dagger, but the heart of a dragon subspecies would need to be pierced through at least 10 centimeters thick. Soren didn't attack the dragon's neck. Instead, he waved his sword and cut the wings of the ice Quetzalcoatlus. In the midst of the blood, the ice Quetzalcoatlus's wings were cut in half, like a tattered cloak fluttering in the snow. This kind of injury was not fatal to the Quetzalcoatlus, but it basically destroyed their ability to fly. The male ice Quetzalcoatlus opened its mouth and bit toward Soren's neck. It was extremely dangerous at this moment. The long and narrow neck of the ice Quetzalcoatlus was almost a meter long, and its head could turn nearly 360 degrees to bite. That was to say, as long as it was within its attack range, there was almost no blind spot for its head to turn, and there was no possibility of dodging. The reflex evasion ability brought about by the advancement of the Shadow Dancer came into effect at this critical moment. Soren almost subconsciously punched the neck of the ice Quetzalcoatlus with his backhand, causing the opponent's attack to deviate a little. Then he bent his body to avoid the bloody mouth that was about to bite him. With a sudden burst of strength, he instantly slammed his head into the jaw of the ice Quetzalcoatlus. A mournful scream rang out. Soren's head was also dizzy for a moment. The impact was very strong and his head wasn't feeling well either. The ice Quetzalcoatlus's lower jaw hit its upper jaw hard, and several of its sharp fangs broke off. Soren's reaction speed was extremely fast. If he had been a little slower, half of his neck would have been bitten off by the enemy. The dragon wings on both sides flapped violently. If Soren hadn't broken its wings, it would have set off a gust of wind. But now it was just flapping its wings toward Soren in front of it. Dragon Wing Strike. It was the most dangerous attack of dragons and it was also the most fatal attack. If someone asked which part of a dragon's body was the strongest, there would definitely be many different answers. Some would say it was their hind legs while others would say it was their forelimbs and head. But in fact, the strongest muscles of a dragon were in its wings. When it launched a dragon wing strike, it could cause a sweeping damage effect. Soren had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The most dangerous attack of a dragon was its dragon wing strike. As one of the larger Quetzalcoatlus, the ice Quetzalcoatlus could also use a weakened version of its dragon wing strike. This ability consumed a lot of energy, and the dragon couldn't use its dragon wing strike continuously. As long as he dodged this attack, the danger of the ice Quetzalcoatlus in front of him would be reduced by at least half. Soren's extraordinary dexterity was at its limit at this moment. His body was almost bent at a 90-degree angle, and he dodged the dragon wing strike in front of him by a hair's breadth. The fierce wind blew his hair up, and the rocks next to him were cracked by the dragon's claws. At this moment, Soren switched from holding the sword with one hand to holding it with both hands. Then along the gaps between the bones he cut through the dragon's skin and muscles, creating a wound nearly half a meter long. The hot dragon's blood splashed half of his body, and his skin was tingling a little. Most dragon subspecies' blood had a weak corrosive effect. Creatures had muscle and bone tracks in their bodies, and it was much easier to cut along these tracks. It was a bit like a butcher dismembering a cow. Legendary melee professions had the legendary ability, Insight into Weakness, which could also achieve a similar effect. Basically, they could inflict more serious damage on the enemy's body. At this moment, Soren seemed to have broken through this state, and he caused nearly 50 points of damage to the Ice Quetzalcoatlus. He rolled to distance himself, and his arm was slightly cut by the sharp ice on the ground. Then he turned over and stood up in an instant. Soren heard the noise from behind and other Ice Quetzalcoatlus rushed over. Sure enough, after the male Ice Quetzalcoatlus attack was thwarted, the two female Ice Quetzalcoatlus at the back became restless. One of them immediately rose into the air, and then rushed towards Soren in front of her. He pulled out another short javelin in an instant, and he basically didn't aim at the target. He didn't even have time to aim. He just relied on his intuition to throw the javelin. However, such an attack was enough to deal with the huge Ice Quetzalcoatlus. The short javelin hit the Ice Quetzalcoatlus' abdomen, and it struggled and wailed for a while. The dragon's claw came from the side. Soren's body emitted a faint magic aura, and the protective energy of stone skin was instantly activated. The dragon's claw hit him and sent him flying 3 meters away, but it didn't cause enough fatal damage. The third Ice Quetzalcoatlus also flew up. It seemed to have realized that the enemy in front of it was unprecedentedly dangerous. It temporarily gave up guarding the dragon egg and with a roar, it launched a dive attack. Swoosh! The crossbow shot the enemy, and Soren jumped behind a rock to avoid the attack. He then raised his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. Then he took out the last short javelin, jumped on top of the rock, and threw it at the injured Ice Quetzalcoatlus in the sky. He first shot down the one that was about to stop flying. The other Ice Quetzalcoatlus didn't attack so quickly. After a dive attack, it had to hover in the air again, and then find a suitable angle to attack from the sky. Soren only had a short time. At most, the Ice Quetzalcoatlus would turn around and launch another dive attack. Bang! The javelin hit the smaller female Ice Quetzalcoatlus again. It finally shook and fell. The muscles near its wings were penetrated by the javelin, and its flying strength was reduced a lot. The vitality of the dragon subspecies was very tenacious. Their basic HP was more than 12 points. Any dragon subspecies had a vitality close to that of a legendary warrior. They conservatively estimated to have more than 300 HP. If he couldn't deal fatal damage, he could only deplete their HP bit by bit. Shadow Strike. Soren roared, cut open the abdomen of the male Ice Quetzalcoatlus, and then jumped on its back. The other party suddenly struggled violently, trying to roll over and throw Soren off. But at this time he suddenly exerted all his strength. The tip of his foot stepped on the Ice Quetzalcoatlus, and his figure leaped up in an instant. The strength of his whole body was concentrated in a line, mixed with the force of falling. Then he clenched his curved sword with both hands and slashed down. The power of sword form Heavy Hack, combined with Shadow Strike, was slashed at the male Ice Quetzalcoatlus' neck. Decapitation. A dragon's head was directly cut off, and the crazy blood covered Soren's whole body. It was as if he had taken a bath with dragon's blood. A row of data appeared: activated Shadow Strike. Activated sword form Heavy Hack. You've dealt 85 damage to the target. Heavy hit. Armor penetration attribute overlay. Sharpness attribute overlay. Successfully triggered decapitation. Decapitation successful. Target's judgment of death failed. Target is dead. The male Ice Quetzalcoatlus body fell to the ground. Even if it still had hundreds of HP, it was already dead. Only the corpse was still twitching in place. The dragon's wings fluttered slightly, and the remaining HP was rapidly depleted. The Ice Quetzalcoatlus in the sky roared, and the still hovering Ice Quetzalcoatlus suddenly fell from the sky and rushed toward Soren. This time, he had no room to dodge. He was in the stiff period after the explosion. Because he had just cut off the male Ice Quetzalcoatlus' head, he happened to be in the line of attack of another Ice Quetzalcoatlus. Life and death were decided in this moment. The Ice Quetzalcoatlus in the sky swooped down toward Soren, and the Ice Quetzalcoatlus that had been hit by 2 javelins in a row also rushed toward him. He had almost no room to dodge, and his body couldn't support a second explosive dodge jump. At this moment, Soren took a deep breath, and then rolled back along the ground, covered with blood. He rolled to the shadow of the male Ice Quetzalcoatlus body, and then his figure disappeared in an instant. Evade sight. Shadow plane travel. Soren's figure suddenly twisted, and then he disappeared. The ice Quetzalcoatlus swooped down from the sky with ferocious strength. Its sharp dragon claws cut open the flesh of the corpse, leaving a mark more than 10 centimeters deep on the ground. If it hit Soren, its claws alone would be able to cut open his stomach. The shadow next to a stone twisted strangely, and Soren's figure appeared 20 meters away. He raised his finger and shot several arcane missiles, and then a faint light appeared in his eyes. A fear fell between the two ice Quetzalcoatlus. No surprise. Fear couldn't work on these dragon subspecies. Soren's spellcasting ability was still too weak. However, he didn't panic at all. After taking a deep breath, he jumped up and rushed directly toward the injured ice Quetzalcoatlus. A strange dark red light appeared on his fingertips, and the moment he touched the ice Quetzalcoatlus, his pale face recovered a lot of color. Vampiric touch. Soren's injury was reduced to a light injury status. The ice Quetzalcoatlus that was touched by him screamed and looked a lot weaker. Chapter 150. Among the low-grade spells there were two major close-range touch spells. One was Vampiric Touch, which could reduce the enemy's HP and then transfer it to the caster. The other was Ghoul Touch, which could paralyze the opponent if they couldn't pass the test of fortitude. After Soren absorbed more than 30 HP, his injuries were basically healed. The frostbite on his arm was almost immediately removed by the abundant life force. Necromancy spells were very useful in actual combat. The ice Quetzalcoatlus in front of him was obviously slower because of its injury. Shadow Strike. Soren's rogue profession was level 9, and he could launch Shadow Strike 9 times a day. As long as there was a direct contact with the opponent, the shadow energy could cause 9 points of erosion damage. Perhaps this damage effect was not much, and it was still better than the effect of Soren's casual slash. However, this damage ignored defense resistance. As long as the target was hit, it would be eroded by the energy, which directly affected the vitality of the creature itself. Shadow Strike. Both attacks scratched the surface of the ice Quetzalcoatlus's skin, but the skin near it was a little dark blue, and the blood vessels were obviously showing signs of shrinking. Shadow energy was very corrosive. Not only could it inflict great damage to the enemy, it could also harm the user's body. That was why many shadow mages were forced to transform themselves into half-shadow life forms after making mistakes in their experiments. In this regard, rogues were much safer because the process of their growth was assimilating shadow energy. A whistling sound broke through the air. After Soren dodged, he rolled behind a rock. This action didn't look very good. In the Middle-earth it was called the rolling donkey move. People who liked to show off would basically not use it. However, Soren did not pay attention to this at all. He took the route of actual combat. He did not care about the demeanor of the battle at all, nor did he care about whether the battle was cool or ugly. Anyone who had experienced a lot of actual combat knew that the effect of rolling to dodge was better than moving to dodge. Combat was a very serious matter. It was foolish to throw away one's life for the sake of elegance. A bloody battle of life and death was not something that could be used to show off. Soren took a deep breath and began to increase the amount of oxygen he breathed in to increase his explosive power. The secretion of Li could be accelerated through some special techniques, and these techniques were the key to training martial arts for professionals. His pupils were slightly bloodshot, and the outline of his pupils was 1.5 times larger than before. There were also some other subtle features on his body. These features were not supernatural abilities, but explosive abilities formed from long-term combat training. This was even before he went berserk. If he was a berserker, he could double his pupils in an instant and increase his adrenaline secretion by several times. The barbarians were the best example of this. When a legendary barbarian went berserk, their eyes would be almost the same color. Their pupils and the whites of their eyes would almost fuse together. This was not because of their ability, but just an external manifestation of their berserk state. During this time, a professionist's ability to capture movement will be greatly strengthened. His heart began to beat faster, like a passionate drum. The moment Soren rushed out, his heart rate almost doubled. This kind of explosive ability required a strong constitution to support it. The consequence of losing the constitution was that the blood vessels would burst. Therefore, many berserkers had a short lifespan. The main reason was that their constitution could not keep up with the consumption. They had used their berserk ability too many times, so they overdrew their own vitality. This was like a master of external martial arts. Quite a few of them could not even live as long as ordinary people. The reason why Sauron added a core point to vitality was to deal with situations like this. Decapitation strike. He leaped out and landed directly on the back of the ice Quetzalcoatlus. Then he twisted his waist and stepped forward to perform a spinning slash. Relying on his strong balance, he found a point on the back of the ice Quetzalcoatlus and used sword form, heavy hack, again. A row of data appeared: activated shadow strike. Activated, sword form, heavy hack. You've dealt 72 slash damage to the target, heavy hit. Armor penetration effect. Sharpness effect. Successfully triggered decapitation strike. Decapitation failed. Target's fortitude test failed. Target has entered a state of severe bleeding. Clang. Soren's curved sword cut into the neck of the ice Quetzalcoatlus. This time he did not cut into the gap between the bones. Instead, he cut directly into the bone, and his palm was a little numb from the shock. The neck of the ice Quetzalcoatlus was cut 10 centimeters deep, and half of the bone was visible. Without enough strength, Soren could not rely on his rare-grade weapon to cut through the dragon's bones. He only caused a severe injury to the target. A large amount of blood gushed out crazily. The ice Quetzalcoatlus let out a frenzied howl. Its whole body kept rolling, and Soren's figure was directly thrown out. Bang! The protective energy of the stone skin on Soren's body vibrated. He was accidentally swept by the dragon's wings and suddenly felt that 2 of his ribs were broken. A mouthful of blood rushed to his throat, but he forced it back down. The ice Quetzalcoatlus, whose neck was cut in half, seemed to have injured its blood vessels. Blood gushed out like a faucet opened to the maximum, and the surrounding area of more than 10 meters was covered in blood. Its vitality was rapidly depleted, and soon its breathing gradually weakened. There's one more. Soren did not dare to look back. He flew into the shadows and then activated evade sight to enter the state of stealth. A dragon's claw with a cold light slashed behind him. Sparks burst from the cold rock, and it left a claw mark that was more than 10 centimeters long and about 5 centimeters deep. The claws and teeth of these ice Quetzalcoatlus were sharper and stronger than metal. Soren's leather armor could not withstand their attacks at all. Only the protective energy of stone skin could resist their attacks. The attack missed, and the ice Quetzalcoatlus obviously retracted its claws. Soren flashed out from the side and swung his sword at the enemy's neck. He did not know if it was because their necks were too long, or because Soren liked the thrill of decapitation, but in the following battle he slashed the enemy's neck several times in a row. Unfortunately, there was no chance for him to exert his strength. Ordinary slashes could at most break the dragon's skin. If he was unlucky, the blade might even get stuck in the spine. However, the effect of the attack was undoubtedly very good. The enemy was bleeding faster and faster, and it began to have difficulty moving its head. That was a moment of opportunity. Soren seized the opportunity when the enemy retracted its wings, turned over and sat on the neck of the ice Quetzalcoatlus, and then used all his strength to press its head down. The continuous bleeding had reduced its strength, and for a moment, its head was heavy. Then a cold light flashed and Soren launched another decapitation attack. But this time the data that appeared was different. Activated shadow strike. Activated sword form, heavy hack. You've dealt 78 slash damage to the target, heavy hit. Armor penetration effect. Sharpness effect. Successfully triggered decapitation. Decapitation successful. Target's judgment of death failed. Target directly died. The battle is over. After this battle, you've learned something about sword form, decapitation. The data of the battle skill appeared. Soren knelt on the ground with a thud, his chest slightly panting, and then struggled to get up. He was not in a hurry to clean up the battlefield but took off his clothes. There were obvious traces of a dent in his chest, and that was his ribs that were broken by the ice Quetzalcoatlus. But fortunately, part of the damage was blocked by stone skin, and the degree of the broken ribs was not serious, and it did not directly pierce into his lungs. If it did, his explosive power would be reduced by 30% in an instant. Soren let out a muffled groan, gritted his teeth and reconnected the broken ribs, and then panted for a moment on the spot. Blunt damage was sometimes more serious than piercing damage, especially when the blunt damage hit the head, and it was possible to directly knock someone out. In the past, he liked to use blunt damage to deal with heavy armor warriors, which could temporarily stun enemies who were not strong enough. To deal with those heavy armor warriors who were like tortoise shells, the effect of slashing and piercing was not enough to cause fatal damage to them. His chest was hit by blunt damage, which was the easiest way to break bones. Fracture, paralysis, shock, stun, stun. Soren looked at the battle skill prompt that appeared, and then began to clean up the spoils in front of him. First was the skinning. Dragon skin was an important raw material for making rare leather armor, and it was quite valuable. The meat of the Quetzalcoatlus could not be eaten directly. Only an extraordinary body like his could withstand it, and ordinary people could be poisoned if they ate it. The most poisonous subdragon species were the wyverns, and their meat could directly poison people to death. The meat of the ice Quetzalcoatlus belonged to the cold attribute. He even remembered that there was once a Chinese medicine expert who calculated the medicinal properties of dragon meat. For example, ice Quetzalcoatlus, cold attribute, great cold, cold poison, liver, lungs and kidney meridians, replenishes vitality, strengthens muscles and bones, strengthens strength, nourishes kidney yang, calms liver and improves eyesight. Those with weak spleen and stomach should not eat it. It can detoxify, but should not be eaten too much or for too long. Women should not eat it during their menstrual period. After eating it, they will bleed profusely and their lives will be in danger. This existence was worshipped by many people at that time. He was the only person in Soren's memory who had trained his medical skill to more than 600 points. It could be said that he was almost entering the path of medicine. It was said that his medical skill could stimulate natural energy and produce healing effects similar to divine spells. This existence was also a very famous gourmet at that time. His footprints were almost all over the world, and he even calculated the medicinal properties of more than hundreds of creatures. He was also the idol of the foodies at that time. It was said that because he ate indiscriminately, his constitution dropped from 18 points all the way to 12 points, and there was no way to recover it with divine spells. In the end he died. Soren did not remember how he died, but he was sure that it was because he ate something that he should not have and was accidentally poisoned. His death could be considered a worthy one. Soren chose a suitable place to start skinning, and then cut off some parts of the dragon meat. The internal organs of the subdragon species could be used as materials, and the dragon blood was suitable for low-level alchemy and scrolls. The most valuable part was the dragon's penis, which could be sold for thousands of gold dirhams. Adding all the other parts together, the profit would be about 10,000 gold dirhams. Overall, Soren's materials for alchemy and scrolls were almost enough. Chapter 151. The ice Quetzalcoatlus was huge. The male weighed more than 3 tons and the other two weighed about 2 tons, so Soren could only pack them as much as possible and choose a better place to bring them back. Normally, there would be 5 or 6 people on an adventure, and that would be enough to transport the valuable items back. There was no such thing as a divine ring with unlimited storage space in this world. The closest thing Soren had seen to a divine ring was the 30-foot storage glove and storage ring. Among all the professions, the only ones who had unlimited storage space were the legendary spellcasters, and then there were the powerful gods because they could open up a dimensional space. If you didn't open up a dimensional space yourself, the storage space of a rare great equipment would be very small. Soren was covered in blood. He took a break to tidy up his clothes, then raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The blood on his body gradually disappeared, but there was still a faint smell of blood. Level 0 spells were very practical, and many times they could solve problems that troubled you. In the wilderness, rogues were the dirtiest because they didn't care about their manners when scouting and exploring. They had to lie on the ground when they should, and even if there was feces in the mud they still had to squat and sneak around. The dirtiest ones were the warriors and rangers, who sometimes had to play a cameo role. The only handsome one in the team was the spellcaster, who was clean and tidy. Sometimes the dwarves were the dirtiest because they had short arms and legs, especially those dwarven heavy warriors who were overconfident in their jumping ability. Plop. You might find a surprise when you turn around. Soren was almost done with the corpse of the Quetzalcoatlus. The smell of blood here seemed to have attracted the attention of some creatures, and Soren vaguely heard some sounds coming from the wind. He looked at the cliff in front of him, then began to collect his most important trophies, the dragon eggs that were placed in the dragon's nest. The price of these things was hard to say. They could be very valuable or they could be suitable for eating because it was very difficult to tame dragons. At present, only the people near Dragon City had mastered the skill of taming dragon subspecies, and no one else could do it. Many creatures were wild and difficult to tame, especially those with innate racial genetic memories. In the past 100 years, the best executors of dragon-type abilities were the drows in the Underdark. Their method was simple and crude. All they needed was a male pure-blood dragon. It was quite difficult for other species to achieve this. The four sides of the cliff were very smooth. Dragon subspecies had high requirements for their nests. These cliffs had been sprayed with their frost breath, and there was a layer of ice about 3 centimeters thick on top of them. Soren touched it and it was very smooth. He couldn't climb up at all. However, Soren wasn't completely out of options. He took out a dagger and stabbed it into the slippery cliff. He then climbed up bit by bit until he was close to the height of a 3-story building. He kicked off the cliff with his toes and jumped into the dragon's nest. There were 3 white dragon eggs in the nest. They were about the size of basketballs and half of them were buried in the ice. There were special requirements for the hatching of dragon eggs. Soren also saw a small pile of kindlers in the dragon's nest. These ice Quetzalcoatlus must have attacked other creatures. It was the nature of dragons to collect wealth, and they would also collect some shiny things. Most of them were of low value and some were even damaged. However, there were some minerals, many of which were crystal, amber, agate, and a fist-sized natural gold nugget. Dragon subspecies sometimes attacked kobolds, and some of the spoils would be taken to their nests. Soren took out a part of the dragon meat and threw it away. He turned his head and put the gold nuggets and gems in it. The things here were worth about 2,000 or 3,000 kindlers. Finally, there were 3 dragon eggs. He stretched out his finger and knocked on them to see if there was any movement in them. Then he raised them to the sun. There were no traces of creatures inside. It seemed that they didn't lay eggs for long. The dragon eggs were still a long time away from hatching. This kind of dragon egg could be eaten directly. It was a first-class delicacy and it was not poisonous. Dragon subspecies eggs couldn't be kept for a long time. There was a need for environmental temperature. Soren put 2 eggs in it and then went back the way he came. He vaguely heard the sound of trolls. He didn't know if it was his illusion, but there were indeed many ice trolls in the Frost Kingdom. Those things were more difficult to deal with than the Quetzalcoatlus. When she saw Soren coming back, Princess Anna was obviously relieved. She raised her little hand and patted her chest and said, "You're finally back. I heard the sound over there and almost wanted to go and see. Fortunately, you didn't come." Soren raised his hand and raised the dragon egg in his hand, raised his eyebrows and said, "I'll treat you to something delicious." He cracked the dragon egg with the handle of his knife. The eggshell was relatively strong. Then he took out a spoon and stirred it inside. He poured in a small bag of flour, followed by fine salt and stirred. Dragon eggs could be roasted directly on the fire. After roasting, they were similar to cooked eggs. The taste was quite delicious. He used to peel and eat them like this. Dragon subspecies were widely distributed and could be seen almost all over the world. Many high-grade adventurers had eaten dragon eggs, and sometimes the pure-blooded ones were also roasted and eaten. The survival rate of dragon eggs is only 1/10. Princess Anna's expression seemed a little worried. She stretched out her white finger and pointed at Soren, then whispered, "I started to hear something in the north." "Something?" Soren went to the southwest. There were other creatures in the north. His face was a little dignified. After fixing the dragon egg, he jumped on the rock and looked around. Unfortunately, he couldn't see anything. Then he slowly said, "It may be the ice trolls. We'll go around them later. We'll stay on the mountainside for 2 days, and then go through the mountains towards the sea. The tormented believers won't guess that you can go over the mountains. We can go around to Arendelle from there." Princess Anna stood up and looked at the mountains in the distance. She murmured, "Can we go over there?" "There's no way. There are many places that we can't get through." "Yes." Soren fiddled with the dragon egg and said in a deep voice, "So you have to wait for me to learn a spell first." Princess Anna was surprised. Her eyes widened and she said, "You're a wizard?" "Nonsense." Soren didn't answer the question. He roasted the dragon egg, broke it open and cut it flat with a curved knife. Adventurers were not so particular. A knife that had just been used to cut people could be used to cut meat. He handed the other half to Princess Anna in front of him and said, "Eat all of it. This can temporarily strengthen your resistance to the cold. The energy is enough for you to last for 2 or 3 days." A small number of foods could increase the status of a wizard. These things were very rare and the dragon egg in front of them was one of them. Resistance-strengthening alchemy potions were made with these materials. The two silently filled their stomachs. The bruises on Princess Anna's body seemed to have lessened a lot because of the dragon egg. She had basically regained her ability to move, but when Soren was ready to leave, she leaned over with a blushing face and then lay on his back. Soren didn't pay much attention to this. He carried the girl on his back and headed southeast, ready to go through the rugged mountain path. Since he had agreed to send her back, he couldn't give up halfway. Soren was a person who valued promises. Half a day passed quickly. They found a deserted cave, which seemed to be the nest of a polar bear. The smell inside was very bad. Princess Anna was a little dirty, mainly because she got dirty when she was cleaning. Except for her pretty and clean face, she didn't have much of the noble feeling of a princess. The girl's ability to adapt was good. She even knew to tidy up because they would be staying here for a few days. Soren set up 2 beast traps and a simple warning trap. Maybe his craftsmanship was a bit wasted. It took him more than half an hour to set them up. His style was still inclined to be a combat-type rogue, and he rarely spent a lot of time studying traps. The main reason was that during a battle, the enemy might not necessarily step on it, so it took a lot of time to set it up in advance. The sky was getting dark. Soren lit a candle and opened a magic scroll. From time to time he would write with a quill pen. He cut a stone into a simple platform. Next to him was Princess Anna with her head tilted. She wiped her clothes with snow, and her hair was tied into 2 ponytails. She sat quietly next to him. He didn't know if it was because she ate the dragon egg, but her face was slightly flushed. Maybe it was because the energy brought by the dragon egg accelerated her blood flow, or maybe it was because of other effects. The girl seemed to be very adaptable to boring things. Her patience must be good, because she could watch Soren analyze spells for 2 or 3 hours. The life of a princess was actually very boring. This was especially true for a princess like her who was destined to manage the kingdom. While other princesses were enjoying themselves, she spent most of her time reading books. Books were the most important source of knowledge in this world. She needed to learn about law, literature, religion, etiquette, art, geography, and other aspects of knowledge. Sometimes her learning tasks were even more important than the ice witches. The kind of princess who grew up and married for the royal family certainly didn't need to learn these things, because their purpose was not to learn these things. But Princess Anna was one of the 2 pearls of Arendelle. When she grew up in the future, she would have to manage at least half of the kingdom's affairs. The people under her rule were estimated to be more than millions of people. She needed to assist the Princess Royal in dealing with the affairs of the country. As a future ruler, it was certainly not enough for her to only play and enjoy. Although she was a princess, she had received the education of a successor to the throne. If nothing unexpected happened, the future ruler of Arendelle would be her child, because few men could match the powerful Princess Royal. It was even possible that she would become a godlike existence. Princess Royal did have the qualifications to become a god. If Princess Royal became a god, she would be the next queen of Arendelle. The throne would be inherited by her bloodline. Although she was a little inexperienced and looked a little childish, she was still very young after all. A 15-year-old girl, you couldn't ask too much of her. Chapter 152. The night was getting darker and darker. Soren was sitting on a cold rock with a quill in his hand. In front of him was a stone table that was split open with a curved sword. In front of him was a magic scroll. For an adventurer like him, his ability to adapt to the environment was undoubtedly very strong. Whether it was a quiet and comfortable hotel or a deserted cave, he could concentrate on what he should do. Next to him was Princess Anna, who was tilting her head. Her little face looked a little baby fat because she was holding her chin with her hand. She looked quite pretty and cute. The princess was definitely not skinny. Soren didn't know how long he had been analyzing the magic model. When he looked up, Princess Anna was a little sleepy, but she still sat next to him and didn't want to disturb him at all. Soren put down the quill in his hand and put the magic scroll aside. He turned around and said, "If you're tired, go to sleep. I have a tent and blanket here. You can spread it out and sleep." Soren had 3 low-level multidimensional bags with a lot of things in them. Without enough wealth to buy a bigger storage item, they could only rely on numbers to win. There was a very popular joke in the past. The specific content didn't need to be said, but it was popularized by the disciples of the Beggars sect. For example, Soren was now a 3-bag disciple of the Beggars sect. In the past, there were some people who had too many belongings but did not have enough money. They were directly ridiculed by everyone as the 9-pouch elder of the Beggars sect. Sauron had even seen the 11-pouch elder of the Beggars sect. That was the real awesome person with all kinds of low-level multidimensional bags hanging on his body. One couldn't carry too many of these things as it would greatly affect one's combat prowess. After all, the multidimensional bag also had weight. Although the weight was reduced by more than 90%, it would definitely be very depressing to carry so many bags in battle. Those who were jokingly called disciples of the beggar's sect had trained their own skills to prevent the bags from affecting their fighting. In Soren's memory there were many disciples of the beggar's sect. For a long time, ordinary disciples with 2 or 3 bags could be seen everywhere. As for the 9-bag elders and 11-bag elders, they were only a few special cases. When Princess Anna heard him speak, she was obviously more energetic. She couldn't help but stand up and shake her little head. No need. You're memorizing spells, so you need to concentrate. I can help you keep watch at night. If there's any movement outside, I'll wake you up. What an obedient princess. Soren didn't expect there to be such an obedient princess. He couldn't help but smile. He subconsciously reached out his hand to pat her little head, but then he remembered that she wasn't Vivian, so he just smiled and nodded. All right then. If you feel sleepy, go to sleep. I've set up a trap outside. Princess Anna nodded gently, her face slightly flushed. She seemed to be in a good mood. Soren continued analyzing the structure of the spell model. As he learned more and more spells, he became more proficient in the field of spell models. Many seemingly difficult spells could be solved with some simple steps. That was to learn their prerequisite spells first. For example, Soren was now analyzing Feather Fall, which was a relatively simple levitation spell. The number of spell circuits and spell nodes was a lot less than Fly. Then there was Levitation, an advanced version of Feather Fall. This spell was a more complex version of Feather Fall. Many of the spell models were the same. The Feather Fall spell model was part of Levitation. Therefore, if Soren learned Feather Fall first, then learned Levitation and then studied Fly, the time spent would be greatly reduced because the previous spell models were already included in the later high-level spells. Learning Feather Fall was equivalent to learning 1/3 of Levitation, and learning Levitation was equivalent to learning 1/5 of Fly. The small details of the spell model structure would help Soren master more high-level spells. Now he had found a way to learn more high-level spells in the future. He could rely on the prerequisite low-level spells to improve the speed and success rate of mastering them. The night passed quickly. When Soren put away the quill, Princess Anna was already a little sleepy. She really didn't sleep all night. She sat next to him in a daze and watched him study the spell models. Occasionally she would listen to the movements outside. Because she didn't sleep the whole night, her beautiful big eyes had some dark circles. Her Royal Highness definitely didn't stay up all night in the past. With her status, even when she slept, there were maids waiting on her until dawn. Sleep for a while. Soren stood up, reached out and touched her forehead. Then he took out a blanket and spread it on the rock. He whispered, "Close your eyes and sleep for a while. I'll wake you up later to eat." No. Princess Anna, who was obviously very sleepy, seemed to want to persist. She whispered, "You didn't sleep all night either. Why don't you sleep for a while and then I'll sleep when you wake up?" Soren smiled and rubbed her head subconsciously. He said slowly, "This is nothing to me. It's normal to not sleep for 10 days or half a month during an adventure. On the contrary, you probably haven't had such an experience before. Take a good rest and recover your energy. We'll probably stay here for another 2 days." Sure enough, Princess Anna did not continue to insist. She lay on the blanket with her petite body and soon fell asleep. She closed her eyes and breathed evenly. She slept very soundly. Soren looked at the sleeping girl. She looked very cute and beautiful. He wanted to lean over and kiss her. But he just reached out and flicked the dust on the girl's hair. Then he moved his body and walked out of the cave. It was so difficult to embark on the road to legend. If he couldn't withstand a little temptation, Soren wouldn't be the Soren he was today, and he wouldn't be qualified to become a legend who could fight with the gods. She was able to endure loneliness and resist temptation. A 3rd or 4th grade professional, if he gave up on tempering his strength and will, could easily become the management of a city or the leader of a gang. Power, money, and women would be at his fingertips. Being in charge of a part of the underground forces, or becoming a well-dressed aristocrat, marrying a noble lady, hiring and buying 3 to 5 pretty maids, and if his taste was a bit heavier, he could even buy beautiful slaves through channels. From then on, it wouldn't be difficult for him to live an extravagant and absurd life. But the result of doing this was that he would be completely corrupted, and he would no longer have the desire to make progress. Many professionals didn't fall in the hands of fierce monsters, didn't fall in the harsh living environment. They withstood the test of death and faced countless dangers, but in the end, they were easily corrupted by the pleasure of life. The reason why legends were legends. It was because legends were so different. Why were legendary wizards so powerful? It was because they spent countless days and nights in the boring research of magic. They thought hard in the tower, they looked at the stars in the middle of the night, they pursued the most essential power of the law of the world. They were the richest professionals, and their wealth was more than that of the royal family. As long as they were willing, they could enjoy the most luxurious life. Since ancient times, there were many intelligent creatures with good talent, but how many people could reach the legendary level in thousands of years? Power wasn't just power. It also represented immortality, represented a long life. Were you willing to stand at the top and laugh at the vicissitudes of the world, or were you willing to be reduced to a pile of yellow soil after 100 years? The reincarnation of the sticks was just a comfort. After the soul was reconstructed, it was completely erased, and the power from the origin was used to reconstruct a soul. There was no such thing as Tao in this world. Perhaps many professionals couldn't understand what Tao was, but they had their own beliefs in their hearts, and this belief was the Tao they were pursuing in their hearts. For example, the ascetic fist master or the sword saint that Soren met in the small village, their power could easily bring them power, wealth, and beauty, but they were still strict with themselves and pursued the path of legends. If there were immortals in this world, then above the legendary level was immortals. Only legends could fight against gods. If you wanted to stand at the top of the world and look down on the world, the tempering of your will was the ladder to the top. Outside the cave, Soren stood halfway up the mountain and looked into the distance. He could see the vast snow-white land, and there were still mountains in the distance. Many of the sceneries were blocked by the wind and snow. Even though he was only halfway up the mountain, he felt open-minded standing here and looking down. He watched silently for a while, then began to practice spells, trying to master the ability, spell control. He didn't have the blood of the Son of God, nor did he have any amazing talent. If he wanted to reach the legendary level, he still needed to climb up step by step. He had to fight against many enemies, and in the future he might have to face the gods who looked down on the world for thousands of years. Vivian was still waiting for his return, and the sons of fear were still killing each other. The shadow of the gods had shrouded the world. He hadn't reached the time to rest and enjoy himself yet. It didn't mean that he had no desires, but it was just that he cared so much about some things in his heart. No one was willing to practice asceticism in the world of ice and snow, and no one was willing to always face life and death battles. The pain left on the body was pain, and the scars on the body were scars. Fighting on the tip of the sword was never a pleasure, and the approach of death would make any living creature afraid. Soren rarely showed anything, but this didn't mean that he didn't feel pain when he was injured, and he didn't feel uncomfortable when he was bleeding. Pain was always pain, and it would never turn into pleasure. It appeared in your body, engraved in your heart, and branded on your soul. To make it stronger. His name was Soren, and he had embarked on the road to becoming a legendary. Injuries were common for him, and bleeding was even more common. But he hadn't fallen yet, and his will was still as strong as steel. P.S. Originally, this chapter was going to be divided into volumes because it just happened to reach the 150th chapter. But I didn't have time to write a summary recently, so I'll leave it for future volumes, and write a summary of the first volume. Chapter 153. Time passed day by day. Princess Anna no longer looked like a princess. She now looked like a beautiful girl living in the mountains. It turned out that a princess could not always look so noble. She even learned to make beds and wash clothes with melted snow. The cave was cleaned by her. She seemed to be a little bit of a neat freak and liked to put things neatly. Sometimes she even had a lot of strange ideas in her mind. For example, if they kept living in the mountains like this, would they give birth to a nest of monkeys in the future? Well, these were just some absurd assumptions of an adolescent girl. At first, she was also worried about what Soren would do to her. Because she was a princess, not an idiot. She would not imagine the world to be too beautiful. But it turned out that she did worry too much. Soren was more of a knight than any knight she had ever seen, although his real identity was a rogue and part-time wizard. Occasionally she would curl up next to Soren. It was difficult for a girl to tell what it was, but she felt that it would make her feel more at ease and sleep better. In fact, Soren hardly rested. His eyes were already bloodshot. He looked like a steel golem that did not need to rest. He spent almost all his time learning and practicing spells. Princess Anna did not know why he was so desperate, but there must be something in his heart that supported him to do so. Occasionally, the girl would think that it was to send her back to Arendelle as soon as possible. This undoubtedly made her feel warm, as if something was about to jump out. Although she wanted to go back as soon as possible, Princess Anna tried not to show her anxiety, because she thought it would increase the pressure on Soren. She felt that Soren was working too hard. He needed to rest. He was a very responsible person, but he also needed to rest. In the end, she was even a little worried about what she should do next if Soren was tired. As a girl who had not yet officially reached adulthood, Princess Anna would feel empty at the thought of this, as if she had lost an important support. The only person who had given her this feeling before was Princess Royal. She used to think that as long as her sister was there was nothing to be afraid of. She had matured. Although her appearance was still pretty and cute and she was still a young girl who was not even 16 years old, she had already tried to change. She learned how to clean, wash, and even cook. Her fair and slender fingers had become a little rough, and her once translucent skin had cracked due to the cold. She didn't even dare to show Soren the frostbite. Sometimes she couldn't help but want to cry when she looked at it. Because she was only a young girl, of course she wanted to see herself beautiful. In the future, when her husband kissed the back of her hand, she wanted his lips to touch the smoothest skin in the world, and not the eye-catching frostbites on it. But she also felt very fulfilled. Days like this sometimes made her feel like she had really grown up. Yes, she was still the Princess of Arendelle, one of the two most dazzling pearls. Her palms were not as beautiful as before, and her clothes were a little tattered. Even if she washed them with snow water, they were still a little dirty. Her hair was just a simple ponytail, tied with a white ribbon torn from her clothes. She took off the exquisite and expensive jewelry, only wearing the earrings left by her mother. Occasionally she would sit by the cave in a daze. The girl's scattered thoughts would think of some ridiculous things, but they didn't seem bad when she thought about it carefully. These thoughts would sometimes make her blush and her heart beat faster. She would also avoid Soren's gaze. In fact, she was also very busy. She had now learned how to cut meat with a knife, how to make a campfire, how much salt to put in when cooking, and how to add extra seasonings to make food more delicious. She had even learned how to sew. In fact, she had learned needlework before. Because she was a princess, she had to be virtuous, noble, and something like that. Anyway, it was the kind that had a lot of compliments. The education that princesses received was very comprehensive, and needlework was definitely included in it. It was just that she used to pass time when she was bored, or embroider some exquisite gifts for her sister in her spare time. Now she was really mending clothes. She was the princess, the Pearl of Arendelle. Even if she wore patched clothes, she still looked good. But when she looked at her frozen little hands, she couldn't help but tear up. It hurts. Soren was a little crazy. Maybe it was because of the last ascetic practice. When he focused on something, he seemed to become a little crazy. The speed at which he learned spells could be said to be abnormal. It would take an ordinary wizard nearly a month to learn a level 1 spell, but it only took him one night and one morning. In the following days, his mind was almost full of complicated spell models. He completed the spell structure of levitation at noon on the 3rd day, and then completed the spell structure of fly on the 5th day. It only took him 5.5 days to learn 3 spells. Time passed faster than expected. When Soren memorized fly in his mind, his eyes were full of blood vessels. The long-awaited prompt finally appeared. After practicing levitation, Soren finally mastered the ability, spell control. Now that he had learned spell control, he had met the requirements to upgrade his wizard profession. Soren couldn't wait to upgrade his wizard profession to level 6, and then got an additional attribute point and an ability point. He waited until now for spell control, because this ability was the prerequisite for many metamagic abilities. Wizard profession has been upgraded to level 6. Received 25 INT 20 plus INT 20 to 10, *0. 5. Skill points, HP increased by 10, profession HP 4 plus, con 21 to 10, *0, 5. Received 1 free attribute point. Received 1 ability point. Suo assigned the attribute points to dexterity without hesitation, and then put all the skill points into literacy. He finally met the requirements to master a metamagic ability. A row of information appeared in front of him. Combat spellcasting, proficiency. Wizards gradually improve their abilities through long-term training. Even if they are attacked in battle, their spellcasting will not be easily interrupted. With the improvement of this ability, even if a wizard is directly attacked, they can still successfully cast spells. Once this ability reached a certain level, some sorcerers would be able to cast spells while they were fighting. However, this may require the combination of silent spell release and instant spell release. Focus plus 10. Mobile spellcasting, proficiency. Wizards can cast spells while moving under special training. They will not interrupt their spellcasting process while moving and dodging. At the same time, with the increase of the ability's level, wizards can cast spells while flying and moving at high speed. This is one of the abilities that high-grade wizards must master. Otherwise, when using fly, it will cause the spellcasting to fail. Focus +5. Enhanced spellcasting, metamagic ability. After wizards master spells, they can use some unique metamagic skills to increase the power of spells. Using these skills will increase the level of spells by an additional level, and increase the power of spells by 50%. When using the metamagic ability to memorize spells, wizards need to spend more time to complete the memorization. When casting spells, there will be no difference from the original spell. Prerequisite 4. Maximum spell release. Spell penetration, metamagic ability. Wizards have a deep analysis of their own power. This can strengthen the penetration ability of their spells. No matter if it is a damaging spell or a controlling spell, when triggering a spell strength test, the wizard can get an additional 2 points. The enemy must have a higher level of immunity to resist the spells they cast. Prerequisite 4. Greater spell penetration. The first 2 abilities were basic abilities. As long as they were not mastered, they would always exist. Soren was more concerned about the last 2 abilities. The first was enhanced spellcasting, which could increase the power of spells by 50%. The second was spell penetration, which could increase the difficulty of spell casting. For example, arcane missile, which could increase the power of spells by 50%. Another example was charm person, which could increase the difficulty of spell casting by 2 points. These were 2 different options. The first one was the most important ability of the turret style. The 50% damage increase was still very shocking. The second one was the core ability of the control style. No matter if it was charm, control, death, or other spells, they all needed this ability to increase their immunity. Soren did not hesitate for too long. He chose enhanced spellcasting. This ability had the most obvious effect on him. Especially after his spellcasting level increased, the power of 5 arcane missiles was equivalent to 5 arcane missiles. As long as he mastered spellcasting proficiency, he would be able to buy UBUBU. Now that she had learned flight, it was naturally time to leave. Although Princess Anna wanted to fly back to Arendelle now, she couldn't help but look back at the cave before leaving. She had cleaned it up very well, but she didn't know which creatures would benefit in the end. When he left, Soren saw the footprints of the ice trolls, all the way to the opposite mountain. It seemed that the ice Quetzalcoatlus bodies he left behind had benefited them. However, these ice trolls didn't seem to disturb the 2 of them. The snow was still flying. Princess Anna was on her way home today. She looked at Soren beside her, her beautiful eyelashes trembling slightly. Chapter 154. Amidst the snowstorm. Soren held Princess Anna's petite figure and slowly flew up. She seemed to be a little excited, but as soon as she opened her mouth, a mouthful of snow was poured into her mouth. Her little face couldn't help but turn red. Only those who had personally experienced strong winds, storms, and typhoons would understand how it felt to lose cover and be exposed to the wild winds of nature. This was a taboo even for wizards. In fact, Soren's expression was also a little excited because flying was always full of beautiful desires. Their figures rose little by little and gradually flew to a height of hundreds of meters. This height was definitely not enjoyable because without the cover of the mountains, the cold wind became even more biting. The speed of flying was about 30 feet to 120 feet, which was about 10 meters per second to 40 meters per second. There were very few people who could exceed this speed. That was because the human body would not be able to withstand it if it went any faster. This was especially true for adepts who had relatively weak constitutions. In Soren's memory, there was only one kind of spell that could reach supersonic speed. The name of the spell seemed to be Spirit Flight. It was an unorthodox high-level spell that was very difficult to learn. After casting the spell, the user would turn into a spirit. They would not be able to attack or cast spells, but they would be able to fly faster than the speed of sound. Since Soren didn't master the ability Swift Flight, and had just learned the flying spell, his flying speed was actually only about 10 meters per second. It was said that someone once reached a speed of more than 100 meters per second, but it required a lot of abilities to support it and a protection spell because it was equivalent to half the speed of a jetliner. Flying was not as safe as one would think, because wizards were most afraid of being cast a dispel spell by the opponent. If the effect of flying was successfully dispelled, the higher you flew, the more miserable you would be when you fell. This was not a joke. Casting a spell at a high altitude required the support of a very powerful basic skill, focus, because casting a spell itself required concentration. If the effect of flying was dispelled and you couldn't cast a spell in the process of falling at a high speed, or if you didn't prepare other spells to deal with falling, then the fate waiting for you was to fall into a meat patty. Even if you were a wizard, you would still fall to your death. That was why wizards liked to research teleportation spells and didn't like to put their energy into flying spells. Some high-grade wizards who liked to fly would only enchant special spells such as Feather Wing and Dragon Wing. These spells were not exactly safe. If an enemy threw out a disintegrate or rupture spell, they would still be stunned. In essence, fly was definitely not as smooth as blink. In the storyline, there were very few native wizards who could fly. Gloria would rather walk than fly. Subconsciously, she had the same concern. The duration of flight was calculated in minutes. Soren's spell power wasn't high. He had a profession level of 6 and an intelligence bonus of 5, so his spell power was around 11 points. He could sustain fly for 11 minutes and fly for around 6,000 meters. Soren's wizard rank was 6, and he had 2 level 3 spell slots. Together he could fly 12 kilometers. This distance was more than enough for them to climb over a mountain. There was a strange sound in the sky. Soren seemed to have heard the sound of the ice Quetzalcoatlus. He quickly lowered his altitude a little, and then made a gesture to Princess Anna in his arms to keep quiet. He slowly flew at a low altitude and sneaked over. Fighting the ice Quetzalcoatlus in the air was completely suicidal. There should be more than 1 or 2 groups of Quetzalcoatlus in this area. Fly was very fast in a straight line, and the speed of ascending and descending was halved. Soren quietly flew over, and soon the field in front of him gradually widened. Over the mountains there was a dense forest, a very dense snowy forest. Soren was undoubtedly relieved. He quickly lowered his altitude and flew slowly, and then landed after entering the dense forest. He still had to walk. But now the road was much easier. It took him half a day to pass through the dense forest with Princess Anna and gradually entered the area where human activities were. Come on. Put this on. Soren took out a cloak and handed it to Princess Anna. He said in a deep voice, "Don't talk too much on the way and don't take off the cloak. The chosen of the gods are very difficult to deal with. Maybe they have spies here." Princess Anna nodded gently, then put on the cloak. This was actually the territory of Arendelle, but no one could guarantee that there were no torturers here. As long as there was a specific target, the legendary wizards could come here in a short time. Soren was not sure about the situation in Arendelle. The chosen of the gods was very powerful, and he did not know if the Princess Royal could deal with it. The most appropriate way now was to disguise themselves and go all the way. By the way, they should see the changes in Arendelle. If there were no big movements, they should be safe. After all, according to Soren's past memory, there was indeed not much happening in the Frost Kingdom. The two of them walked all the way along the snow. They slept in the wilderness for a night, then continued for tens of kilometers until they finally saw the outline of a town. This is the town of Taradu. Princess Anna recalled and whispered, "If we continue forward, we will be close to the sea. This town seems to be managed by a baron. I can't remember his name." There were many towns under the kingdom of Arendelle, mainly because the area of arable land was not as large as the southern region. The number of large cities was less than 1/5 of the southern region. However, small villages were very rare, mainly because it was difficult to maintain villages in the Frost Kingdom. The monsters here were generally difficult to deal with. It could be seen that something must have happened in the kingdom of Arendelle because Soren saw the guards on guard and the cross erected outside the town. A cross. This was a special symbol. It didn't have a religious significance like it did in his previous life. Instead, it represented a type of punishment. There were only 2 types of punishments that frequently used the cross. The first was being nailed to the cross, and the second was the familiar burning penalty. These 2 punishments were rarely used in the kingdom because they were too cruel. The most common punishments were beheading and hanging. Ordinary punishments were either fines, hard labor, or relatively severe whipping. At most, the punishment was to be cut at the waist. The cross was mainly used to punish the fallen, and burning was most commonly used to punish the followers of evil gods. It looks like something has really happened. Soren glanced at the cross from a distance. The blood on it had frozen into ice. It was estimated that someone had been nailed to death. He turned to look at Princess Anna next to him and whispered, "Follow me, don't talk." The guards in the town were on high alert. Soren took Princess Anna forward little by little. Suddenly there seemed to be a commotion next to him. Everyone nearby retreated in awe. The commotion here attracted the attention of the guards. A security captain who looked like a big man from the north came over. He shouted loudly and waved the whip in his hand. But then his expression became very ugly. His eyes were full of awe as he took a step back and bowed his head slightly to show his humility. It was a woman who appeared. A woman who looked a little evil. Her face was covered with a veil, and her pupils were quite seductive. Her silhouette was somewhat of an Indian woman. Her hair was tied into small braids with many scattered decorations on them. The woman was wearing a black robe with a mark of a skull on the front. This symbol could not be used indiscriminately. If she was not a priest of the god of death, using this symbol would lead to other troubles. But in fact this woman was not a priest of the god of death, but a priest of another god. There was an emblem on her chest with a blood-red background, with traces of white bones and black antlers. This was a priest of the goddess of misfortune. There were two goddesses among the gods. The first was the goddess of fortune, and the second was the goddess of misfortune. Whether you believed in them or not, it was best to show the appropriate awe after seeing their priests. Because these two goddesses were notoriously difficult to deal with, their personalities and preferences were difficult to judge, and their demand for believers was not high. Among the gods of the whole world, the goddess of fortune and the goddess of misfortune had the fewest priests, because regardless of whether there was a priest to expand the faith, they were one of the two most familiar and most frequently mentioned gods. Even Soren prayed to the goddess of fortune for luck, which showed how special their existence was. The goddess of misfortune was an evil and willful goddess, and her priests were not much better. Because priests were rare, almost none of the priests of the goddess of misfortune were simple characters. Although they could not bring you good luck, they could make you be entangled in misfortune. This was not a joke. The priests of the goddess of misfortune had the ability to reduce luck, which could make you unlucky for a long time. The world was more in awe of this goddess. Soren was also quite afraid of the goddess priest, so when she passed by, he quickly pulled Princess Anna and bowed slightly to show respect. No one wanted to be entangled in misfortune. Things should have been over like this. The priest of the goddess of misfortune walked straight past, and no one dared to stop her, but she stopped in front of Soren. The woman looked at him with strange eyes, then slowly spread out her hands, and the emblems of antlers and bones were engraved on her palms. She slowly said, "The goddess needs you to sacrifice to her." The people around him immediately made way for him. Soren's expression was a little stiff because this move was a bit like he was being blackmailed, and he had to take something out. Princess Anna quietly pulled the corner of his clothes, and Soren did not hesitate much. He quickly took out more than a dozen kindler, and then carefully put them in the palm of the woman's hand and said, "I humbly offer a sacrifice, may the goddess of misfortune watch over my enemy." Chapter 155. The annual ticket for the game category is already about twice as much as the second place. Let's work harder to triple the gap. This ticket is free and it will be in your account. Please vote. This was a very clever answer. Although the misfortune goddess could not bring good luck to people, she could bring misfortune to people. Therefore many people worshipped the goddess because of her awe. They prayed that they would not be haunted by misfortune, or that the misfortune goddess would punish their enemies. In ancient times, there was a goddess of luck who was in charge of both luck and misfortune. This powerful goddess fell for some reason. However, two new goddesses were born at the same time from her divided corpse. These two goddesses were the goddess of luck and the goddess of misfortune. It was said that the goddess of luck inherited all the fickle character of the previous goddess, so luck always came without warning. The goddess of misfortune inherited all the beauty of the previous goddess. It was said that all men who had seen the goddess of misfortune were either burned to death by their own desire or desperately tried to satisfy every unreasonable whim of the goddess of misfortune. There was even a legend that any woman who saw the goddess of misfortune would immediately fall into a state of madness. Therefore, this goddess was also called the Lady of Misfortune. Most of the priests of the Lady of Misfortune were thieves, assassins, bards, and could also advance to become a special envoy of opportunity. There were many difficult female gods, the most famous of which was the Twin Queen. The Twin Queen referred to the goddess of luck and the goddess of misfortune, and the queen was the very familiar Queen of Spiders. Overall, the most difficult to deal with was the Queen of Spiders, because the fickle goddess of luck and the goddess of misfortune were qualified to be on the same level as the Queen of Spiders. The goddess of misfortune was half of the queen of spiders. Then the priest of misfortune in front of him was half of Rose's priest. Soren glanced at his target and looked at her slender waist. The goddess of misfortune's favorite weapon was the artifact, misfortune, which was a special nine-tailed whip. That was why most of Lady Calamity's priests were good at using whips. Soren did not know why the goddesses were so stupid as to always use whips in their weapons. The succubus queen had the divine weapon, lover's whip. Unknown, Lady Tormentor had the divine weapon, tormentor, nine-tailed whip. Lady Calamity had the divine weapon, unfortunate fate, nine-tailed whip, and the queen of spiders had the divine weapon, destructive fury, nine-tailed whip. You'd better watch out for goddesses with whips. They were the fighting faction among the goddesses, and many gods had died in their hands. The queen of succubus had killed 2 generations of abyss lords. The lady of torment had also killed many weak gods. The lady of calamity had killed the god of rogues, and the queen of spiders had god's blood all over her hands. The number of gods who had died in the hands of the queen of spiders was close to double digits. Soren was very wary of the priest in front of him. He didn't believe in fate, but he did believe in luck. A piece of good luck could let you break free from death, and a piece of bad luck could push you into the bottomless abyss. Therefore he quickly offered up the sacrifice and then said his prayer. The twin of destiny fought their own battles during the turbulent period. Basically, no one dared to find trouble with them. It was just this pair of sisters who wanted to fight to the death. If the goddess of misfortune had not begun to look for allies, it was estimated that the other gods would not have been involved in this battle of luck. Anyway, the divine power of these 2 goddesses was very strange. Sometimes even the great god's luck could be affected. However, in any case, these 2 goddesses were famous for their golden thighs. Although their personalities were capricious, when there was a chance to hug them, he still had to be courteous. Even if it couldn't improve his luck, he could still spend money to avoid disasters. The woman with some strange pupils looked at Soren. She looked down at the kindler in her palm, moved her lips slightly, and then put the badge representing the goddess of misfortune on Soren's forehead. She playfully said, "The goddess has taken away your misfortune, but you need to offer more sacrifices to express your sincerity and get the blessing of the goddess of misfortune." The blessing of the goddess of misfortune? When Soren heard this word, he was a little stunned and looked up at the woman in surprise. The priest who dared to say this was not simple. The blessing of the gods was a special kind of blessing. At the very least, the priest of the archbishop level was qualified to represent the blessing of the gods because they had mastered the ability, divine power. The archbishop was a quasi-legendary priest, and legendary priests could also mobilize weak divine power. The priest of misfortune in front of him dared to say this sentence. Did she have the status of an archbishop in the church of the goddess of misfortune? But she didn't look like a legendary priest. The strange woman in front of him was still looking at Soren with a playful expression. Her expression seemed to be interesting. When she saw that Soren was a little hesitant, she seemed to be a little unhappy and wanted to withdraw her hand. Her figure was ready to continue forward. Soren obviously paused for a moment, and then hurriedly pulled her back. He gritted his teeth and took out all kinds of gems and gold coins from his multidimensional bag. He took out at least a dozen gems, all of which were reserved for alchemy. They were at least equivalent to the value of thousands of Kindler coins. Seeing these sparkling and translucent gems, the bewitching woman revealed a smile on her face again. She naturally put away these offerings and gave Soren a look. But he was still a little hurt, so he didn't notice it for a while. She had no choice. The strange woman could only tiptoe. There was a difference in height between the two. She was only about 1.65 meters tall. The woman kissed Soren's forehead, then the side of his face, and then whispered in his ear, "The goddess of misfortune has begun to pay attention to your enemies. You have used your sincerity to get the goddess blessing." A faint light appeared on the emblem. It was invisible to the naked eye, but Soren still saw a little bit of it. The strange woman didn't seem to have any intention of staying. After she put away all the gems, she walked forward with a satisfied look. She didn't know why, but before she left, she looked at Princess Anna next to her inexplicably. She left directly like this, and basically no one dared to stop her. The name of the goddess of misfortune was not a joke. Perhaps it was because of the fear of misfortune. The others didn't dare to approach Soren. The guards didn't stop him and let him pass directly. The goddess of misfortune was famous for being vengeful. She had very few priests, and those who dared to attack her priests would definitely be retaliated against. Now that even Soren got some benefits, the group of guards didn't dare to question him. Princess Anna's expression was still okay. She blinked her beautiful big eyes, leaned in front of Soren and whispered, "It seems that she really is a high-grade priest of the goddess of misfortune. You definitely won't encounter misfortune in the future. Our luck is really good. A priest of the twin of destiny is very rare. I was also blessed by a priest of the goddess of misfortune when I was very young. I haven't seen them since then." Soren couldn't help but be stunned. Then he frowned slightly, pulled Princess Anna forward, and at the same time said in a deep voice, "You were blessed by a priest of the goddess of misfortune?" "Yes." The girl nodded naturally, then smiled and said, "It seems that my sister specially invited them. What a coincidence. Now you are also blessed by a priest of the goddess of misfortune." "Oh." Princess Anna's slow head finally turned and murmured, "The goddess of misfortune? The goddess of misfortune?" The two of them sped up as they walked forward. There were some customs in this world that were almost everywhere. For example, when a newborn was born, they would generally pray to many gods. These gods were not only good, but there were also evil existences like the goddess of misfortune. Parents would offer sacrifices to pray that their children would be lucky, and at the same time, pray that misfortune would not fall on their children. This was a kind of worship full of reverence. However, if there was a priest of a god present in this ceremony, the other parts of the ceremony would be cancelled because the realm of the gods covered each other. Therefore, if there was a priest of the goddess of misfortune present, there would never be a ceremony to worship the goddess of misfortune. There was no trace of the strange woman in front of them. Soren and Princess Anna couldn't find her. She just walked into the crowd and quickly disappeared. Princess Anna's expression was a little hesitant as she murmured, "This shouldn't mean anything, right? Maybe it's just a coincidence?" Although the goddess of misfortune is not kind, she can indeed bless people. Soren seemed to be a little silent. If all this was a coincidence, he couldn't be sure because so many people stopped in front of him. The goddess of misfortune and the goddess of good fortune had been fighting for thousands of years. If Princess Anna was really blessed by the goddess of good fortune, then she definitely had the aura of good fortune. Soren couldn't see this aura, but the priest of the goddess of misfortune definitely could. Maybe she really just happened to pass by here, but the act of blessing Soren didn't seem to be just a coincidence. What was her purpose? Hero's luck, aura of good fortune, blessing of misfortune. Soren checked his data display and found that there was really an extra ability which was a special ability of background. Blessing of the goddess of misfortune. Blessing of the goddess of misfortune, special ability. You have received the blessing of the goddess of misfortune. Your luck will not be reduced below the average level. You will be immune to any spells that bring misfortune such as disaster, misfortune and so on. At the same time, your enemy will be watched by the goddess of misfortune. When any judgment occurs, you will receive a deduction of 1 point of misfortune. These judgments include attack, hit, evasion, immunity and so on. Note: you have entered the site of the most capricious goddess of misfortune. Pray for yourself. Unlucky. Chapter 156. I really got the blessing ability. Soren stared at the crowd, but he could no longer see the woman. Who is she? The blessing ritual shouldn't be that simple, right? Just a kiss on my forehead, then a kiss on the side of my face and a few words? Soren remembered that he had received the blessings of the Queen of Spiders and the Goddess of Wealth. Both rituals didn't seem that simple. The Queen of Spiders' blessing ritual was completed by Loltha's priests, and there were also some evil and taboo rituals to please the Queen of Spiders. After completing this relatively depraved ritual, the Queen of Spiders would bless the target. The Queen of Spiders must be pleased. The Goddess of Wealth's ritual was a little simpler. She either had to make a corresponding contribution or give a large amount of money. The blessings of the gods weren't as powerful as one would think, but they were definitely not weak either. The most basic blessing was the immunity bonus. Most gods could give an additional 1 point in judgment. Then there were other bonuses after the blessing, depending on the clergy's abilities. For example, Soren's current blessing was immunity to misfortune. The Goddess of Wealth's blessing was a trade bonus, as well as some clergy's trading privileges. The Church of Wealth had a strong control over trade. The most powerful blessings of the gods were the few that could increase one's attributes. Soren's deepest memory was the Succubus Queen's blessing. It could increase attributes by 2 to 4 points, and any judgment including attack, accuracy, evasion, and endurance, would have an additional 4 points in blasphemy. This special blessing seemed to be called Queen's Kiss. However, it seemed to have a very high price. After all, pleasing the succubus queen was much more difficult than pleasing the queen of spiders. There was a certain price to pay for blasphemy. The queen of spiders' blessings also had blasphemy bonuses, and it required an evil depraved ritual. Divine blessing blasphemy ritual? He didn't know why. But all the blessings given by the evil gods were very high, and the blessings given by the good gods were very little, unless one became a chosen or a favored. Soren suspected that he had met the incarnation of the gods. If the gods gave up fighting against the energy storm and directly separated their clergy, then they could fall to the mortal world ahead of time. Generally, no gods would do this. They were also very clear that it was very dangerous to come to the mortal world. However, if it was the goddess of misfortune, there would not be such a worry. There were almost no legendary professions who could kill her. It was more difficult for non-gods to deal with her than to deal with gods with great divine power. This was because misfortune could destroy a large group of enemies. His enemies suddenly came knocking on his door, and he encountered a monster the moment he stepped out of his house. He accidentally offended other legends. Just thinking about it made his scalp tingle. No matter how one looked at it, misfortune was too supernatural. Not many people were willing to take the risk. However, if Soren had met an incarnation of a god, the blessings would have been more than that. A god's personal blessings were equivalent to the treatment of a god's chosen. Usually, the blessings would come with additional attributes. That woman might be the chosen one or the chosen one of the goddess of misfortune. He could not rule out the possibility that she was possessed by the goddess. He just did not know why she would bless him and come to the Frost Kingdom at this time. The gods of the Chaos faction had a headache. The members of the Order faction had their own set of rules, but the members of the Chaos faction acted according to their own preferences. The more chaotic they were, the harder it was to judge their actions with common sense. She might even destroy a town on a whim or something she didn't like, or cause a calamity to befall a certain place. Lady Calamity's reputation had been built up in this way. Soren did not dwell on it for too long. It would gradually become very common to meet legends, chosen one, son of God, and even the incarnation of a god or a saint. Basically, every god would have their own chosen one and chosen one. There were at least 2 or 3 legendary professions in the church. The special situation of the time of troubles forced all these people to come out. If it was during normal times, they would definitely stay in their own territory. For example, if no one disturbed them, these liches could quietly study for hundreds of years. As long as there was no other purpose or lack of materials, they hardly went out. Speaking of liches, in Soren's memory, there should be a lich about to come out. It was a very powerful shadow lich. It killed the chosen one of the current god of rogues and then had a fight with the lesser divine power. The outcome did not seem to be clear. Anyway, in Soren's memory, the god of rogues did not die in the hands of the shadow lich. After the appearance of this lich, it was almost time for the queen of spiders to appear. The insidious and powerful queen of spiders sensitively perceived that this was an important opportunity. She actually took the initiative to give up her priesthood to come to the mortal world, and then began to plan in advance to deal with the time of troubles with the drows under her control in the Underdark. This woman was not simple. If there was any god that Soren was afraid of, the queen of spiders was probably the only one. She even left a doppelganger in the abyss to make the other gods think that she was still fighting against the energy storm to ensure that she would not fall to the material plane. But in fact, she had already secretly entered the mortal world. It was not until halfway through the time of troubles that the other gods found out that she had already woven a huge spider web in the mortal world. At that time, the queen of spiders had become the hunter, and the other gods had become her prey. The coquettish Black Widow. This was a special code that represented the mark of the incarnation of the queen of spiders. Only the most devout fanatics knew about her arrival. Fortunately, it was not the queen of spiders. Soren quickly left the town with Princess Anna. As they got closer and closer to Arendelle, they could feel the slight sea breeze and the faint smell of the sea in the air. Arendelle was a large city built by the sea, and it was also the most prosperous city in the Frost Kingdom. Soren also saw other crosses and fleets coming and going in the distance. Merchants rarely went to the Frost Kingdom from the land. They would worship the sea goddess, the storm lord, or all of them before leaving. Worship of the gods was a very serious matter. A large-scale sacrifice would even attract the attention of the gods. They would cast their eyes here and then give the rewards that the sacrifice deserved. This was a divine mark that could make the monsters in the sea not dare to attack the fleet. As long as they were not so unlucky as to encounter a sea monster, the journey would be relatively smooth. Even if they encountered a storm, they might survive, provided that they worshipped the Storm Lord. Orthodox worship of the gods required at least thousands of kindlers' offerings, and it was not held many times a year. Princess Anna looked a little excited. Maybe it was because after so long she could finally go home. Soren became more and more serious and cautious. He looked into the distance and stopped and said, "If I were the chosen of the goddess of torture, I would ambush near Arendelle and monitor where you might appear. After all, you still have to find a way to come back. In other words, the safest place may be the most dangerous place." Princess Anna could not help but feel a chill in her heart and murmured, "What should I do then?" Soren took her to the side of the road and said in a deep voice, "Do you have any way to contact the Princess Royal? With her wisdom, she will certainly notice this. What I'm worried about is that if we encounter the Chosen, we will have no chance to escape. Before the Princess Royal comes, they will catch us. To be honest, in the face of an enemy above the legendary level, I have almost no chance to make a move." There was no way to fight. An instant cast Finger of Death, an instant cast Hold, or even an instant cast Charm spell could all end Soren's life here. The threshold of the legendary realm was too difficult to cross. Princess Anna was obviously aware of this, and her face became a little worried. Because in the worst-case scenario, even if they met the people who came to pick them up, if the elder princess was not present, or other legendary professions were not present, the other party could kill them in an instant, or take Princess Anna away, and then open a portal to leave. Who would be able to stop her then? Soren had always been a very cautious person and liked to expect the worst first. It was always better to be prepared. There were many things that couldn't be done recklessly and risked one's life. Suddenly, Princess Anna seemed to think of something and her eyes lit up. "I got it. When I was a child, if I was in a bad mood or felt very uncomfortable, as long as I thought of my sister in my heart, and she was not too far away from me, she might feel it. Maybe this can let my sister find us in advance. As long as she knows where we are, she will definitely come to pick me up." Telepathy? There seemed to be a distance limit, right? There might be telepathy between sisters, but that kind of vague feeling seemed to be unable to determine the location, right? However, since the Princess Royal was the legendary Destiny Warlock, maybe she really had a way to find them. If not, she could use the prophecy spell to locate them. As long as there was a vague direction, she should be able to easily find the two of them. Princess Anna really did what she said. She immediately sat on the ground, a little like kneeling, and said seriously, "Sister, come and save me. Sister, come and take me home. Sister, Anna really misses you." This scene was so beautiful that it made people want to laugh. Soren wanted to laugh at first, but gradually his expression became serious because Princess Anna's look became more and more solemn, and even a little pious. What kind of telepathy was this? It was clearly praying to the gods. Chapter 157. The wind and snow around them trembled slightly. Soren held his curved sword vigilantly. Princess Anna seemed to become more devout, and her expression was a little excited. Little sparkling snowflakes appeared out of thin air, dancing together with the cold wind, and turned into an existence that looked almost identical to Princess Anna, but had a completely different temperament. She was more mature than Princess Anna, and her figure was taller and more voluptuous. Even if she had no expression, people could not help but feel a sense of superiority. "Anna." Princess Royal gently landed from the wind and snow. Her clothes did not flutter at all, which made Soren squint slightly. "Sister." Princess Anna couldn't help but stand up. She opened her hands and wanted to hug the elder princess, but then she remembered something. She couldn't help but slow down and gently touch her hand. The elder princess's fingers turned into snowflakes and then quickly returned to their original appearance. "What?" Soren's eyes showed a hint of shock. What appeared was not Princess Royal's real body, but an ice and snow avatar she made with some special power. The wizard's level 7 spell was Projection, and the level 8 spell was Simulacrum, but none of them could be as amazing as Princess Royal's. She appeared here directly, but her real body was still in Arendelle. This was not just a spell, it might even have penetrated some kind of law. It was estimated that the avatar of a god would be no more than this. Was she a human? Or a god? Princess Royal's eyes fell on Soren. As if she had seen something, she could not help but frown slightly. She gently stretched out her hand and slowly said, "Anna, I'll take you back now. It's still dangerous outside. Get ready to enter the portal." The sound of a spell was faintly heard. A portal made of ice and snow appeared in front of the two people. Soren was already a little dumbfounded. Princess Royal had completely overturned his previous understanding. It was estimated that the gods and saints who came to the mortal world and fought against a large group of legends could only do this. Were mandate warlocks really that powerful? Princess Anna reacted quickly. She reached out and grabbed Soren and then entered the portal. Space began to distort. It was a very uncomfortable feeling because moving across space was not comfortable. Fortunately, the time was very short. After a slight shake, Soren was pulled by Princess Anna to the top of a magnificent castle. In front of them was another Princess Royal. This time it was not an incarnation because she had the aura of a living person. She slowly opened her eyes. Her blue pupils were dreamy and blurred, as if they could make people lose themselves in them. She gently spread out her arms and hugged her. Anna. Sister. Princess Anna rushed in at once. Princess Royal hugged the girl in front of her and turned her head to look at Soren. She frowned slightly and said, "Captain, send this guest to rest. I want to talk to my sister for a while." She was not angry. The moment Soren saw Princess Royal, he could not help but tremble. He had an inexplicable feeling of wanting to bow down and worship her. Princess Royal just stood there quietly, like a queen overlooking the world. She clearly had the same face as Princess Anna, but she was as beautiful as a dream goddess. Just a glance at her was enough to make people's minds tremble. Soren bit the tip of his tongue slightly. His heart was already in turmoil. He secretly said, "What a high charm. This is definitely more than 30 points of charm. It has begun to affect my mind. What an amazing charm." It gave people the illusion that they were looking at a natural king. It was almost to the level of interference with matter. Legend has it that the Queen of Succubus in the Abyss, as long as someone saw her face, they had to go through a legendary level charm spell. If they could not pass, their mind would be affected by the Queen of Succubus. This special divine domain was called seductive beauty. There was also the supreme god of the nature god system in the past, the legendary goddess of nature. She also had this ability, but her divine domain was called nature's beauty, which also had a legendary level of will. Soren clearly felt that from the first time he saw her, his will was forced to go through a test. He passed. But he did not dare to look at her again because he was worried that he would have to go through another will test, unless he was willing to succumb to Princess Royal's charm. She obviously did not have the ability to cast any spells. She just naturally appeared in front of him, and it already had such an effect. This reminded Soren of a saying, "Never look directly at the face of those gods who are famous for their charm. Your mind will be affected by their beauty." The current representative gods were two, one was the Queen of Succubus, and the other was the goddess of love. The two sisters whispered something to each other. Princess Royal moved her finger slightly, and Soren could not hear any sound. A dignified court lady came over, bowed slightly and said, "This way please. Her Majesty the Queen asked me to treat you well. We have prepared a room for you, you can rest there. Thank you very much for bringing Princess Anna back safely. Her Majesty the Queen will give you the reward you deserve tomorrow." Soren frowned slightly, then bowed slightly to Princess Royal and followed the court lady out. This doesn't seem to be friendly. Princess Royal didn't even want to say a word to me? Wasn't this attitude a little too cold? Huh. Princess Anna, who had said a lot, finally came back to her senses. She held Princess Royal's white fingers and said happily, "This time it's all thanks to Soren. If it weren't for him, I'm afraid I would have been caught by those bad guys. Sister, you must reward him well." Where's Soren? Princess Royal's mouth showed a rare gentle smile. She reached out and stroked Princess Anna's long hair and said slowly, "I think he's very tired. Let the guard take him to rest. If there's anything you want to tell him, you can tell him later. Now you must be tired. Shall I take you back to your room to have a good rest?" Princess Anna found that she was really sleepy. She had hardly had a good rest these days. When she finally returned to Arendelle, she suddenly felt tired. She wanted to take a bath immediately and have a good sleep on the soft bed. Sister was right. She was really tired now and her body was dirty. She should take a bath first, then sleep, and then show Soren what she really looked like. I'm a princess. He always treats me like a little girl in the countryside. I'm so cute and moving, but he doesn't look at me seriously at all. Princess Anna thought for a while, then followed Princess Royal into the palace. The furnishings around were so luxurious. Exquisite murals and sculptures, soft plush carpets and crystal lamps hung above. The wealth accumulated by Arendelle for thousands of years made every corner of the palace show the most luxurious wealth in the world. Princess Royal asked someone to take Princess Anna to bathe and change clothes, but she came to the hall of the palace. The guard captain who took Soren away was already here. She bowed her head slightly. Arundel did not have the etiquette of kneeling. On formal occasions they only knelt on one knee. Usually they just bowed their heads to show respect. The guard captain quietly walked to the Princess Royal's side and whispered, "I've already let him live in the side hall." He refused to serve the maids. It seems like he's an adventurer who knows how to restrain himself. Princess Royal's expression was a little inexplicable and she said slowly, "I smell fear and doom on him. This man is not simple. There's too much blood and slaughter on him. Get someone to prepare a reward tomorrow morning, then send him out of here." The guard captain nodded slightly and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." Princess Royal hesitated a little, reached out and rubbed her forehead and said, "After all, he saved Anna. The reward can be more generous. Let someone go to the treasury and choose 1 or 2 legendary equipment. I don't think an adventurer like him cares so much about monetary rewards." The guard captain was a little stunned and then said, "Yes, Your Majesty. You may leave." Princess Royal waved her hand gently, then walked to the balcony of the castle, looked at the mountains covered with snow in the distance and murmured, "The gods have begun to appear. The Winter Maiden has come to the mortal world in person. The gods have lost contact. What does this mean? A mortal with the smell of fear and the blessing of Lady Calamity. We must not let him get too close to Anna. Lady Calamity itself represents misfortune. People who can be blessed by her must bring disaster. The trajectory of his fate seemed to be filled with endless blood and slaughter. Destiny? Why is it that the closer we are to fate, the more we see, the more confused we are? Is there a fate in this world? Or is it that our fate is constantly changing?" Princess Royal's figure slowly disappeared. The next moment she appeared outside a room. Inside was a natural hot spring. Arundel had the best natural hot spring in the world. The hot spring was brought to the palace by Top Alchemy. Every year, more than 10,000 kindlers were spent to maintain it. There were hot springs flowing here all year round. Princess Anna's favorite thing was to soak in it and sleep with her eyes closed. The room was filled with water vapor, and one could vaguely see the palace maid serving Princess Anna to bathe and change clothes. The girl's white and round toes tapped in the bath, and then slowly walked in with a sigh of satisfaction. Princess Royal showed a faint smile and gently took off her long dress. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.